homeless veteran Navy SEAL was living in an old Suburban with his nephew and injured K9. Then his estranged wealthy father died and left him a motel abandoned for 22 years. Northglass had only 16 rooms, but Everett received a brass key marked 17. Soon Vesper began reacting to forgotten K9 signals hidden around the property. Those clues pointed toward a buried secret, a missing past, and a father Everett thought he understood. What Room 17 finally revealed would change everything he believed about loyalty, forgiveness, and second chances. Tell us where you're watching from, and please like this video and subscribe to K9 Navy SEAL Stories. Rain had a different sound when a man lived inside a car. On a house roof, it could be comforting. It could make a person grateful for blankets, coffee, and walls. On the roof of a 25-year-old Chevrolet Suburban, it sounded like thousands of cold fingers reminding Everett Rourke that there was nowhere else to go. The rain had been falling over northern Wisconsin since before midnight, silver under the parking lot lamps and nearly horizontal whenever the wind came hard off the bay. Water streamed down the windshield in crooked rivers. Beyond the glass, the rear wall of a closed hardware store appeared and disappeared behind the weather. Everett woke at 4:17 a.m., not because of the rain, because his left knee had begun to throb. At 43, Everett was still a formidable-looking man despite 7 months of bad sleep and cheaper meals. He stood 6'1", about 185 meters, with broad shoulders and the hard, balanced build of someone trained for functional strength rather than appearance. His face was angular and weathered, with a defined jaw, moderately prominent cheekbones, a straight nose, and deep blue-gray eyes that had spent too many years measuring doors, rooftops, hands, and distances before deciding whether a place was safe. His skin was sun-browned and slightly rough. Fine lines had gathered around his eyes earlier than they should have. His dark brown hair remained cropped short in the practical military style he had never bothered to abandon, though silver had begun showing at both temples. Short, natural stubble covered his jaw. He wore the same clothes he had worn the day before, a faded olive-green field jacket over a red and deep navy plaid flannel shirt, dark green cargo pants, worn brown leather boots, and an old military wristwatch whose face was scratched but dependable. Dependable mattered to Everett. Pretty had stopped mattering years ago. He shifted carefully behind the steering wheel. Pain traveled up his left leg. He stopped moving. Beside the center console, 2 amber eyes opened. Vesper had been awake before Everett made a sound. The 8-year-old male German Shepherd was large without being oversized, built with the compact, efficient muscle of a working dog, rather than the exaggerated proportions of a show animal. His short black and tan coat was thick and healthy despite their circumstances, with a dark saddle across his back, a black muzzle, and warm tan along his chest and legs. A few pale hairs had begun appearing around his muzzle. His triangular ears rose, his amber-brown eyes fixed on Everett. Vesper had served beside him before both of them had learned the humiliating vocabulary of retirement. Disability evaluations, medical appointments, limitations, paperwork. A scar crossed the dog's right shoulder. An older injury in his right hind leg stiffened in cold weather, just as Everett's left knee did. 2 broken soldiers, Everett sometimes thought. One of them had the good sense not to complain. "I'm fine," Everett whispered. Vesper continued staring. That wasn't a request for a second opinion. The dog's expression did not change. Everett almost smiled. Almost. Vesper wore no harness while sleeping. His old dark olive working harness, faded military patch and all, hung from a hook behind the passenger seat. Everett checked the back of the Suburban. 15-year-old Noah Mercer was curled beneath 2 blankets on the flattened second-row seat. He was about 5'8" and still growing, slim but healthy beneath the awkward angles of adolescence. His face was slightly long, his chin beginning to sharpen, and his light skin looked paler than usual after months of poor sleep. Thick medium-brown hair had fallen across his forehead. His hazel-green eyes were closed. He wore a charcoal gray hooded sweatshirt beneath a faded dark denim jacket, black work pants, and worn gray hiking shoes. A small canvas tool pouch sat near his backpack. Everett had repeatedly told him he didn't need the tool pouch while sleeping. Noah had repeatedly ignored him. That, Everett privately admitted, was probably hereditary. Everett turned the ignition 1 click and checked the fuel gauge, just above empty. He calculated automatically. Fuel, breakfast, maybe enough left for pain medication, not all 3. He shut the ignition off without starting the engine. Behind him, Noah opened his eyes. Everett didn't notice. The boy had become very good at pretending to sleep whenever Everett counted money. 7 months earlier, they had still had an apartment. Everett had worked security at a freight terminal after leaving military service. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid reliably. Then Claire died. His younger sister and her husband had been killed in a highway accident, leaving Noah with no one Everett trusted more than himself. So Everett became a guardian. School meetings followed, grief counseling, court appointments, nights when Noah woke and couldn't breathe because his mother's voice had appeared in a dream and vanished again. Everett missed shifts, then more shifts. His employer had been patient until patience became a line item. After the job disappeared, rent rose, medical bills did not. The Suburban became temporary shelter. Temporary became 7 months. Everett had spent years entering places other men were desperate to escape. Homelessness had taught him something war hadn't. There were battles no amount of training could make impressive. Sometimes survival was just deciding whether breakfast or gasoline mattered more. Vesper rose, stretched carefully, favoring his right hind leg for 2 seconds before distributing his weight normally. Everett noticed. He always noticed. "Still fine?" Noah asked from behind him. Everett glanced into the mirror. "Thought you were asleep. Thought you weren't limping. Neither of us is very convincing." Noah sat up. For a moment, he looked younger than 15. Then the guarded expression returned. "I've got $11. "No, you didn't even ask where I got it. I know where you got it. You fixed that guy's phone charger at the laundromat. Technically, I fixed the cable." "No, it's $11. Not stolen uranium." Everett looked forward again. "No." Noah leaned back, frustrated. He didn't understand that Everett's refusal had nothing to do with $11. It was the idea that the boy might believe he needed to pay for his own place in the family. Everett would sleep under a bridge before allowing that. What Everett failed to understand was that every refusal taught Noah a different lesson. Your help is not needed. Your burden is. By 7, the rain had weakened to a gray drizzle. Everett was under the raised hood of the Suburban examining a battery terminal when a dark sedan entered the nearly empty lot. His body changed before his thoughts did. Shoulders settled, weight balanced, eyes tracked the vehicle. Vesper stood beside the front wheel. The sedan stopped 20 feet away. A man emerged. He appeared to be in his late 50s, medium height and slightly stooped, with thinning gray hair, pale skin, narrow wire-framed glasses, and the careful manner of someone accustomed to delivering information people rarely welcomed. His navy raincoat was practical rather than expensive, and he carried a leather document case against his chest. He stopped well outside Everett's reach. "Good instincts. Mr. Everett Cole Rourke?" Everett wiped his hand on a rag. "Depends." The man blinked. "On? Who's asking?" "My name is Martin Keene. I'm an estate administrator retained to assist with the affairs of Gideon Rourke." Everett's hand stopped moving. Rain ticked against the hood. Noah appeared near the passenger door. Martin looked from Everett to the boy, then to Vesper. His expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry to find you under these circumstances." "Which circumstances?" Martin hesitated. "Your father died Monday evening." Everett felt nothing that frightened him more than grief would have. Gideon Rourke. 19 years without a telephone call, 19 birthdays, 19 Christmases, a military career, a war, wounds, Claire's wedding, Claire's funeral. Silence through all of it. Everett lowered the hood. "When's the funeral?" "It was private. Of course it was. There is a reading and estate conference tomorrow in Marquette, 11 in the morning. I'm not going." Martin seemed unsurprised. "Your presence isn't mandatory in the criminal sense, Mr. Rourke. But there are assets requiring acknowledgement. I don't want his assets." Martin handed him a sealed card. "I was instructed only to locate you and deliver this." Everett didn't take it immediately. Vesper stepped closer, not aggressive, just present. Martin noticed. "Beautiful dog. Retired K9. Like you?" Everett finally accepted the card. "Something like that." Martin returned to his sedan without another argument. That was almost worse. No pressure, no mysterious warning, no threat. Just an envelope and a dead man who had found one final way to enter Everett's life. Everett was about to throw the card onto the dashboard when Vesper suddenly froze. The German shepherd's ears pitched forward. His attention wasn't on Martin's departing sedan. It was on the envelope. Vesper stepped closer, inhaled once near Everett's hand, then looked up into his face with the intense waiting expression he used before a working command. Everett frowned. "There's nothing there." Vesper remained motionless. Noah came closer. "Why's he doing that?" "Could be ink, paper, something on Keene's hands." But Everett knew Vesper. The dog wasn't excited by a scent. He was waiting, as though something about the object had placed him inside an old pattern. Then the moment passed. Vesper sneezed, shook himself, and walked back beneath the open rear hatch. Noah watched him go. Normal? No. That single word stayed with them longer than Everett wanted. He still planned not to attend. Then Noah asked the question. They were eating peanut butter sandwiches in the Suburban when the boy said, "What if Grandpa left something for Mom?" Everett stopped chewing. Noah looked down. "I mean Claire." Everett hated when Noah corrected himself. "You can call her Mom." "I know." Rain slid slowly down the side window. Noah picked at the bread. "Maybe there's a box. Photos. Letters. Something she would have wanted me to have." Everett stared at his nephew. Claire had been 3 years younger than him, stubborn enough to challenge Gideon and gentle enough to keep loving him anyway. She had spent years trying to repair the distance between father and son. Everett had always assumed there would be time. Then there wasn't. "We'll go," he said. Noah looked up. "Really? Don't make me say it twice." A small smile appeared. Vesper's tail struck the floor once. Everett looked at him. "Nobody asked you." The tail struck again. The drive to Marquette took most of the next day. By the time they arrived, the storm had moved east, leaving a pale sky over Lake Superior. The law office occupied the second floor of a restored brick building, rather than some gleaming corporate tower. Everett appreciated that despite himself. Inside, they were met by attorney Helen Ward. Helen was 62, tall and slender, with straight silver blonde hair cut to her jaw, fair skin, sharp gray eyes, and the calm posture of a woman who had spent decades watching rich families discover that money did not improve their manners. She wore a charcoal pantsuit and spoke without unnecessary warmth or unnecessary coldness. Her gaze paused on Everett's field jacket, Noah's worn shoes, and the old watch. If she judged any of it, her face revealed nothing. "Mr. Rourke." "Noah, thank you for coming." Everett noticed she had learned the boy's name. That earned her 1 point. "Can the dog come in?" Helen looked at Vesper. "Will he eat the furniture?" "No." "Then he's already better behaved than several beneficiaries I've represented." Noah coughed to hide a laugh. Everett's mouth twitched. 1 point became 2. They entered a conference room overlooking a line of bare trees and distant water. Helen did not waste time. Gideon Rourke's estate, she explained, was complicated but largely settled. His business interests had been distributed through corporate structures established years earlier. Charitable trusts held substantial portions. Several conservation entities had received land. Certain personal holdings had gone to longtime employees and associates. Everett listened without reaction. He felt strangely relieved. There would be no mountain of money, no miracle check, no final attempt by Gideon to purchase forgiveness. Then Helen opened another folder. "Your father left you one real property." Everett leaned back. "Of course he did." Helen slid a photograph across the table. It showed a long, low motor lodge surrounded by northern forest. The faded sign read, "Northglass Motor Lodge." Behind it lay a lake. "Lake Arden," Helen said, "Upper Peninsula. Approximately 40 miles from White Pine Crossing. Operating no. How long? 22 years. Noah leaned closer. The photograph showed broken gutters and weathered siding. "That's a motel, historically." Everett looked at Helen. "What's wrong with it?" "That depends on how long you have." Short version, 16 guest rooms, manager's cottage, office, storage structure. Several roofs require substantial work. Electrical service has been disconnected for years. Plumbing condition is uncertain. There are structural concerns in at least 4 guest units. Noah murmured, "So Grandpa left us a hobby." Everett gave him a look. Helen almost smiled. "An expensive hobby." Everett studied the photograph. There was no anger in him now, just exhaustion. It was exactly the kind of inheritance Gideon might leave, property instead of apology. "Can I sell it?" "Eventually." Everett looked up. Helen rotated a document toward him. "There is a 30-day restriction beginning upon your formal acceptance of the deed. During that period, you may not sell, transfer, mortgage, substantially alter, or demolish Northglass." "Why?" "The will does not provide a motive." "What happens after 30 days?" "A secondary legal option becomes available." "What option?" "I'm not authorized to disclose its terms until the restriction expires or certain conditions defined in the trust documents are satisfied." Everett stared at her. "My father is dead, and he's still giving orders." Helen met his eyes. "That would not be an entirely unfair interpretation." Noah shifted. "Do we have to live there?" "No," Helen said. "The restriction concerns the property, not your residence." Everett looked again at the motel. 16 dead rooms, a lake, 40 miles from a town he had never heard of. It wasn't wealth, but it was land, and for 30 days at least, nobody could take it from them. That thought embarrassed him, because the first thing Everett imagined was not selling it. It was Noah sleeping somewhere he could stretch his legs. Helen finished the paperwork and then reached into a smaller file. "There's one additional item." She placed a plain cream envelope in front of Everett. His name was written across it, not typed. Written. Everett knew the handwriting. Gideon's. For the first time that day, something moved beneath his ribs. He opened it. No letter, no apology, no explanation, only a motel key. Old brass, scratched with age. Attached to it was a dark leather fob stamped. Noah leaned closer. Room 17? Everett picked up the Northglass property sheet. 16 guest rooms. He counted anyway, 1 through 16. There isn't one. Helen checked her copy. No room 17 appears in the registered floor plan. Everett turned the key over. A smaller piece of old leather had been fastened behind the number tag. Embossed into it was a simple symbol, a mountain ridge. Beneath it, a dog's paw. Vesper rose. The German shepherd had been resting quietly beside Noah's chair. Now his ears came forward, his head lowered. He approached Everett's hand. Everett held the key several inches away. Vesper inhaled. Once. Then again. His expression changed. Not recognition. Not excitement. Focus. The dog's body became very still. Everett knew that posture. He had seen it in places where the air smelled of dust, cordite, hot metal, and fear. Vesper looked at the leather symbol, then at Everett. His right front paw shifted half a step forward. His head tilted fractionally toward Everett's left side. A waiting posture. An old trained response. Everett's pulse slowed rather than quickened. That was what happened when something bothered him. Noah noticed. What? Everett didn't answer. He moved the key to his right hand. Vesper's eyes followed. He lowered it. Vesper sat. Not a casual sit, a clean working sit. Helen watched from across the table. Did you command him? No. Everett turned the leather fob again. Mountain. Paw. He had seen something like it before. Not in his father's house. Not anywhere he could immediately place. Some old training document. A diagram. A faded emblem. Something connected to dogs. Or perhaps he was forcing meaning onto coincidence, because Gideon had always been good at making people question themselves. Everett put the key back into the envelope. Vesper relaxed almost immediately. Noah stared at the envelope. Okay, that's weird. He's a dog. He's your dog, which makes that sentence a terrible argument. Everett stood. We're done. Helen gathered the documents. You have 30 days, Mr. Rourke. 29 too many. But outside, Everett did not throw the key away. He put it in the inside pocket of his olive field jacket. They left Marquette in the late afternoon. The Suburban rolled north beneath a sky clearing after days of rain. Sunlight broke through the clouds in long, pale columns, touching stands of birch and pine. Water glittered on the branches. The world looked scrubbed clean. Noah sat in the passenger seat with the Northglass photograph on his lap. Vesper lay behind them with his head resting on Everett's backpack. Everett drove with both hands on the wheel. His knee hurt. The engine had developed a faint vibration above 55. They had very little money. His father was dead. He had inherited a motel that had been closed since Noah was not even born. There was nothing miraculous about any of it. Everett preferred it that way. Miracles usually came with people trying to sell something. 30 days, he said. Noah looked over. What? We keep it 30 days. After that, we figure out what can be sold, what can't, and what the smartest move is. Sounds suspiciously like a plan. I've had those before. Were any good? Statistically, 1 or 2. Noah smiled. For several miles, neither spoke. Then Noah looked again at the photograph. Uncle Everett? Yeah. If your dad hadn't spoken to you for 19 years. Everett's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Why would he leave you a key? Because he enjoyed being difficult. To a room that doesn't exist? Everett said nothing. Noah waited. That was something he was getting better at. Maybe it isn't a room, Everett finally said. Then what's the 17? I don't know. Behind them, Vesper lifted his head. Everett saw the movement in the mirror. The German shepherd looked first at him, then toward the inside pocket of the olive field jacket where the key rested. For one quiet second, Everett had the irrational feeling that the dog was waiting for him to remember something. He dismissed it. Memory did not live in brass keys. Dead men did not send messages through dogs, and coincidence was not destiny simply because a person needed it to be. Everett kept driving. Ahead, the road bent north toward Michigan. Behind his seat, Vesper lowered his head onto the backpack again. Inside Everett's jacket, the brass key to room 17 tapped softly against his old military watch whenever the Suburban crossed a crack in the road. 16 rooms, one impossible key, and a father who had waited until death to put a question into his son's hand. Everett intended to keep Northglass for 30 days, not 1 day longer. For the moment, that was the only promise he was willing to make. By the time Everett Rourke crossed into Michigan's Upper Peninsula, the rain had finally begun to break. For 3 days, the sky had seemed made of wet iron, hanging low over the roads, pressing down on the old Chevrolet Suburban until even Noah had stopped making jokes about the windshield wipers. But somewhere north of Escanaba, The clouds lifted in ragged bands, and pale winter sunlight began spilling through them onto forests of red pine, white birch, and dark spruce. The change in light altered the whole world. Rainwater shone silver along the shoulders of the road. Birch trunks flashed white between the pines. Small lakes appeared unexpectedly beyond the trees, flat and blue-black, catching the sky like pieces of broken glass. Everett drove with both hands on the wheel, his old military watch visible beneath the cuff of his olive-green field jacket. His deep blue-gray eyes moved constantly between the road, the mirrors, and the aging temperature gauge. He did not trust the Suburban enough to admire scenery for long. Noah Mercer sat beside him in his faded dark denim jacket over the charcoal gray hoodie, knees angled awkwardly because he had grown another inch since spring, and the passenger seat no longer seemed designed for him. His small canvas tool pouch rested between his boots. Behind them, Vesper lay across the folded rear seat. The 8-year-old German Shepherd wore his dark olive working harness now. His black and tan coat caught warm highlights whenever sunlight passed through the windows, though silver around his muzzle made him look older than the alert amber eyes suggested. His right hind leg had been stiff after the cold night, but after the first hour of driving he had loosened into his usual controlled movement. Noah looked out the window. "This is what Grandpa picked." Everett glanced at him. "You say that like he personally invented Michigan." "I'm saying if you're going to leave someone a broken motel, you could at least put it somewhere ugly." Everett almost smiled. "Maybe ugliness cost extra." Noah looked over. "There it is. What? Your annual joke. Don't get greedy." For a few miles, neither spoke. The easy exchange disappeared as quickly as it had come. Everett had been thinking about Gideon too much. Not the inheritance, not the legal restriction, just the fact that the man was dead. Death should have simplified things. Instead, Gideon had somehow become more complicated after dying. Everett disliked that. He had spent 19 years reducing his father to a clean internal sentence. Gideon Rourke chose power over family. Simple, useful. Now there was a motel, a strange condition attached to it, and too much silence where Everett had once thought certainty lived. He tightened his hands around the steering wheel and felt the familiar pull along his right ribs where an old scar remained hidden beneath the flannel shirt. He could survive 30 days. He had survived worse. That was one of Everett's habits, turning emotional problems into endurance problems. Noah was beginning to notice. White Pine Crossing announced itself with a weathered wooden sign carved in the shape of a pine ridge. Population 842. The number looked optimistic. The town occupied a shallow valley bordered by forest with a single main street, 2 gas pumps under a red canopy, a hardware store, a post office, a small clinic, and several buildings that seemed to have been repaired so many times that nobody could remember what the original material had been. What it lacked in size, it made up for in stubbornness. A bakery advertised cinnamon rolls beside a taxidermy shop. An old man in blaze-orange suspenders shoveled wet leaves away from a pharmacy entrance, despite there being almost no leaves left. Christmas lights had already been wrapped around the lampposts, although half were not yet plugged in. Noah leaned forward. "I kind of like it. You've been here 40 seconds. Still ahead of most towns." Everett slowed near an intersection. The directions Helen Ward had given him led past town toward Lake Arden, but the Suburban's fuel light had come on 5 miles earlier. He pulled into a small roadside cafe with a hand-painted sign reading, "Bell's North Country Cafe, hot coffee, soup, pie." The word pie had been repainted more recently than anything else. Inside, the place smelled of coffee, fried onions, cinnamon, and wood smoke. The woman behind the counter looked up before Everett had even closed the door. Mara Bell was 61, around 5'5", with the sturdy build of someone who had spent most of adulthood standing, lifting, carrying, and refusing to admit when her feet hurt. Her face was round, tending toward long, softened by age but sharpened by watchfulness. Freckles remained visible across her fair skin beneath fine lines around warm, amber-brown eyes. Brown hair streaked heavily, with silver reached her shoulders and was tied low at the back of her neck. She wore a rust-red quilted vest over a cream thermal shirt, dark brown work pants, weathered tan ankle boots, and a dark green apron with flour dust on one side. The first thing Everett noticed was that she looked at Vesper before she looked at him. The second was that she did not flinch. Working dog, retired. Mara nodded once. Smart ones usually are. Vesper stood beside Everett, posture calm but attentive. Noah looked at a display case. "How much is the pie?" Everett gave him a look. Mara caught it. "Depends whether you're asking because you're hungry or because you enjoy disappointing yourself." Noah smiled. "Both. Then sit down." We're only getting gas, Everett said. There's no gas pump in my kitchen. I noticed. So sit down anyway. There was no obvious charity in her voice, which was probably why Everett obeyed. They took a booth near the window. Mara brought coffee for Everett, hot chocolate for Noah, and a stainless bowl of water for Vesper without asking. Then she set 2 bowls of chicken and rice soup on the table. Everett looked at them. We didn't order. No, I can pay. I didn't ask whether you could. His jaw tightened. Mara noticed. Her expression changed just enough. Relaxed, navy. Everett's eyes narrowed. How did you? Haircut, the watch, the posture, the fact that you looked at both exits before you sat down. She nodded toward Vesper and him. Noah tried very hard not to look pleased. Mara rested one hand against the back of an empty chair. Besides, I've seen that face before. Everett went still. Mara studied him for another second. Rourke, not a question. Noah lowered his spoon. Everett said, Everett Rourke. Mara let out a quiet breath. Well, something passed through her expression. Not affection, not fear. Recognition mixed with an old irritation. You've got Gideon's eyes. Everett did not like how quickly the room seemed smaller. You knew him. I knew of him before I knew him. Then I worked for him. At Northglass? Mara nodded. Front desk, summer shifts, then year-round for a while. How long ago? Long enough that my knees were still optimistic. Noah smiled. Everett didn't. How long has it really been closed? 22 years. That matched the documents. At least something does. Mara glanced at him. You inherited it. Again, not a question. News travels fast. This is White Pine Crossing. A new mailbox is gossip. She returned to the counter, then came back with a coffee pot. Everett watched her fill his cup. Why did it close? Mara paused. Officially, yes, maintenance costs, seasonal decline. Gideon had bigger properties making more money, and unofficially, her amber-brown eyes settled on him. There are always unofficial versions after 20 years. Most are nonsense. Which one do you believe? Mara set the pot down. I believe your father could have sold Northglass a dozen times. Everett waited. He never did. Maybe nobody wanted it. Mara gave him a flat look. Lakefront property? That landed. She added, there were offers, developers, vacation cabins. Somebody wanted a private hunting club. Gideon said no every time. Why? If I knew, I would have charged you for the soup. Noah snorted. Everett looked toward the window. Past the glass, Vesper's reflection stood beside the booth, ears alert. Then Mara said, almost casually, your sister came through here too. Everett turned back. What? Claire. Noah's hand stopped halfway to his mug. Mara's face softened. Maybe 4 times that I remember. Could have been more. When years after you left. Everett felt a pressure behind his sternum. You're sure? I knew Claire. She looked like your mother around the eyes. Noah stared at Mara. My mom came here? Yes, honey. The word was gentle, but not pitying. Why? Mara looked at Everett before answering. She didn't always tell me. Everett's appetite disappeared. Claire had come to Northglass. Claire had never told him. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit. His first reaction was anger. His second was shame at having the first. Mara seemed to read part of it. Families are strange animals, she said. Sometimes the person carrying messages between 2 stubborn men gets tired of explaining herself. Everett said nothing. Noah looked into his hot chocolate. The room suddenly felt full of Claire despite there being no photograph, no voice, nothing tangible at all. Everett paid for fuel from the pump next door and insisted on paying for the meal. Mara allowed it eventually, though only after removing the price of Vesper's water from the imaginary bill, with such seriousness that Noah laughed. Before they left, Mara wrote her number on a paper napkin. If the place gives you trouble, call. I can handle a building. I wasn't talking about the building. Everett looked at her. Mara had already turned away. Northglass Motor Lodge sat 7 miles beyond the edge of town. The road narrowed through forest, following the land until Lake Arden appeared suddenly between the trees. Noah stopped talking. Even Everett forgot the suburban's vibration for a moment. The lake stretched long and cold beneath a clearing sky, deep blue toward the center and silver near shore. Pines crowded the far bank. White birches climbed the slope behind them like thin white flames. Rain still clung to every branch. The motel stood above the water on a low rise. Time had not destroyed Northglass. It had simply stopped asking permission. The lodge formed a shallow crescent facing the lake. 16 guest room doors sat beneath a long covered walkway. The cedar siding had faded to gray-brown. Moss darkened the lower steps. Gutters sagged. A section of roof over the eastern wing had collapsed inward, but the rest still held. The old roadside sign leaned slightly toward the lake. Northglass Motor Lodge. The paint had peeled from several letters, but the name remained readable. Noah stepped from the Suburban slowly. This place is huge. It isn't. It has 16 rooms. That is not huge. For someone whose current house has 4 doors and wheels, it's pretty huge. Everett looked at him. Noah raised both hands. Too soon? About 7 months too soon. Vesper jumped down carefully. His right hind leg landed a fraction more stiffly than the others, Everett noticed. Vesper immediately lowered his nose to the wet gravel. Not searching, reading. There were deer scents, raccoons, old wood, lake water, rust, mice, wet leaves, petroleum from the Suburban. The dog moved methodically without urgency. Everett watched him for a moment, then turned toward the building. "Stay where I can see you," he told Noah. "I'm 15. "Yes, you say that like it's evidence against me. It is." Everett began inspecting the property. His SEAL background did not make him a structural engineer, and he had no intention of pretending otherwise. But years of operating in damaged buildings had taught him enough to recognize obvious hazards. Room 3 had visible ceiling sag. Room 5 smelled strongly of mold through the cracked doorway. 7 through 9 had water intrusion. Room 12 had a section of subfloor that flexed badly under pressure. He marked each unsafe door with strips of orange tape from the Suburban. Noah followed, carrying a flashlight. "Are we going to inspect all 16? "Yes. Was hoping you'd say no. You're free to stand outside." "I was also hoping you wouldn't say that." The manager's cottage sat behind the office, slightly uphill. It was small, 1 bedroom, a narrow living room, compact kitchen, bathroom, and enclosed porch, but the roofline was intact. The windows were dirty rather than broken. Everett checked the floor, dry enough, no major sag. 1 cracked window, old rodent evidence, but nothing fresh enough to concern him. "This one," he said. Noah looked around. "This is our luxury suite for 30 days. You really know how to sell a lifestyle." Everett pointed toward a pile of dead leaves. "Start sweeping." Noah sighed theatrically. Vesper entered behind them, sniffed the corners, then settled near the front door. For the first time since leaving Wisconsin, Everett felt something loosen slightly inside his chest. The cottage was ugly, cold, dusty. But when Noah stood upright, his head was not touching the ceiling of a vehicle. That alone felt dangerously close to gratitude. They worked until sunset. Noah coaxed life from an old battery-powered lantern after cleaning corroded contacts with a scrap of sandpaper. Everett covered the cracked window with plastic sheeting and secured it with tape. They found a rusted cast-iron stove that would need inspection before use, so Everett forbade Noah from touching it. They laid out sleeping bags. Vesper explored the yard. At 4:20 p.m. he walked toward the lake. Everett barely noticed. Vesper stopped at the edge of a patch of wet grass 30 yards below the motel. He sat, not because Everett told him to, not because he was tired. He simply sat facing the far shore of Lake Arden. His ears stood forward, his body remained completely still. Everett watched from the porch for almost a minute. No growl, no alert bark, no tracking posture, just attention. "What does he see?" Noah asked. "Probably a deer." "There isn't a deer. You seeing through forest now?" "No, but he isn't looking into the forest." Everett frowned. Noah was right. Vesper's gaze was fixed slightly above the waterline, toward a dense stand of trees on the opposite shore. Everett called him, "Vesper." The dog looked back, then looked toward the far shore once more before returning. Nothing followed. No movement, no sound, no mystery solved. Everett dismissed it as a working dog's refusal to stop monitoring his environment. That evening, however, while Noah slept in the bedroom and Vesper lay near the door, Everett found himself standing at the dirty window. Looking across the lake, he could see almost nothing. Still, for several minutes he did not move. The next morning dawned clear and painfully cold. A thin crust of ice formed along shallow puddles. Everett's knee punished him immediately. He hid the limp badly. Noah pretended not to notice badly. They spent the day clearing debris. Everett removed a loose section of gutter before wind could tear it down. Noah found an old toolbox beneath the manager's kitchen sink containing screwdrivers, pliers, electrical tape, and a voltage tester. Most teenagers might have discovered treasure with less satisfaction. This is actually decent. 20-year-old tools. Tools don't age the way people do. Everett stared at him. Noah slowly looked toward Vesper. "I meant, generally. Keep digging." By afternoon, Noah managed to repair a connection between an old deep-cycle battery and 2 low-voltage utility lights left in the manager's cottage. When one bulb finally glowed yellow, he raised both arms. Electricity. One bulb. Civilization started somewhere. Everett looked at the light. It was weak. It was still the brightest thing they had owned in months. He swallowed around an unexpected tightness in his throat. "Good job." Noah froze for half a second, then shrugged. "Yeah," but his face changed. Everett noticed that too. At 4:21, Vesper walked outside. Same path, same patch of grass, same direction. This time Noah checked the time. "You seeing this?" Everett stood in the doorway. "Yes." Yesterday was 4:20. 1 minute is not a conspiracy. I didn't say conspiracy, you were thinking it loudly. Vesper stayed for almost 4 minutes, then returned. Everett inspected the shoreline himself. He found nothing beyond old dock posts, reeds, wet stones, and deer tracks. Noah looked across the lake. Could be sound, could smell, across that much cold water. So no, so possible, not likely. What does that leave? Everett straightened. A dog being a dog. Noah looked unconvinced. Vesper scratched once behind his ear and yawned. It weakened the drama considerably. On the third day, the sky turned brilliantly clear, the kind of northern winter light that made every edge sharper. Everett had spent most of the morning checking the old motel rooms again while Noah sorted salvageable hardware into piles. Shortly after 4, Noah called from outside. "Uncle Everett." Everett emerged. Noah pointed. Vesper was already walking toward the lake. 4:19. The dog reached the same place, sat, waited. Noah stood beside Everett. Neither spoke. At 4:23, the sun dropped low enough to strike the opposite ridge at an angle. A flash appeared between the trees. Tiny, bright, gone. Noah inhaled sharply. There. Everett had seen it. Another flash. Not movement, reflection. He returned to the Suburban and retrieved compact binoculars from an emergency bag he had refused to sell. Through the lenses, the far shore sharpened. Pines, birch, a narrow patch of exposed rock. Then something rectangular fixed to a tree, metal or glass, angled deliberately. Everett lowered the binoculars. That isn't natural. Noah's excitement surfaced immediately. What is it? Don't know. Can we go over? Not today. Why? Because it's almost dark. Noah stared at the lake. We've been homeless 7 months and somehow this is the first time you've become risk-averse. Everett looked at him. That's exactly why we've survived 7 months. They waited until the following morning. An old aluminum and wood canoe lay upside down near the motel's former boat rack. Everett inspected it carefully, testing the hull and seams before deciding it remained serviceable. He found 2 paddles in the storage shed. Vesper wore his working harness. Noah wore a borrowed orange life vest left in the manager's cottage. Everett found another that fit badly but functioned. Lake Arden was calm. The crossing took less than 15 minutes. On the opposite shore, Vesper moved ahead at walking pace, nose low. Everett did not command him to search. The reflective object was easy to find from that side. A small polished steel plate had been fixed to the trunk of an old pine and angled across the lake. Weather had dulled most of it. One corner remained bright. Below it, nearly hidden by moss, stood a square cedar post. Noah brushed it clean, carved into the wood. Everett felt the brass key in his pocket before he consciously reached for it. 10 feet away, they found a narrow steel box strapped to the back of the same tree. Not buried, not concealed behind a wall, just positioned where casual hikers would probably mistake it for abandoned utility equipment. The lock was old brass. Everett inserted the key. It turned. Noah let out a quiet laugh of disbelief. Inside lay several objects wrapped in waxed cloth, a reel of 8mm film, a folded map, several faded training cards printed with directional symbols, a small black and white photograph, and a brass dog whistle attached to a braided cord. Everett picked up the photograph first. A younger Gideon Rourke stood beside a large German shepherd. Everett recognized his father immediately despite the darker hair and younger face. Gideon was tall, around 6 feet, broad through the upper body without being athletic, his square face dominated by a strong jaw and broad forehead. His blue-gray eyes looked severe even in the photograph. Dark brown hair was combed neatly back from the temples. He wore a dark charcoal wool coat over a white dress shirt and deep burgundy tie, dark tailored trousers, and polished brown shoes. Formal clothing made almost absurd by the mud around his feet. Beside him stood a German shepherd. The handwritten word on the back read, Argos. Noah looked over Everett's shoulder. He had a dog, apparently. You never knew? No, that bothered Everett. Another thing he had not known. Another room in his father's life he had never entered. He picked up the whistle. It looked ordinary. Old brass, small enough to fit between 2 fingers. Everett blew once. He barely heard anything. Vesper did. The German shepherd's entire posture changed. His ears rose sharply. His head came up. He stepped sideways, turned approximately 90 degrees, then stopped and looked back at Everett. Everett froze. Noah stared. What was that? Everett blew again. Vesper repeated the turn. Not perfectly, but clearly. Everett lowered the whistle. I know that response. From where? Old directional work. Military? Some programs. Everett studied the whistle. Gideon had died before ever meeting Vesper. Yet here was a training cue from his past producing a recognizable behavior in Everett's retired military dog. No ghosts. No magic. There would be an explanation. Everett believed that. He simply didn't have it yet. Noah unfolded the map. It showed Northglass as it had been decades earlier. 16 guest rooms, office, manager's cottage, laundry structure, boat storage, picnic area. Then Noah pointed. Here. Behind the manager's cottage was a small rectangle. Service cabin B. Someone had written over it by hand. Everett stared at the marking. The cold air seemed to shift. Something moved at the edge of memory. Thunder. A dark room. Blankets. A child's fear. And fur. A large dog lying below the bed. Everett blinked. The image vanished. Noah noticed his expression. You okay? Everett folded the map too quickly. Fine. That looked like your lying face. I only have one face. That's unfortunate. Everett almost answered. Instead, he looked across Lake Arden toward Northglass. From here, the motel appeared small beneath the forest. 16 rooms facing the water. And somewhere in an older version of the property, a service cabin somebody had decided to call 17. Everett looked down at Vesper. The dog stood quietly beside him, the silver beginning around his muzzle bright in the winter sun. Everett had spent years believing his father's life and his own had separated cleanly 19 years earlier. Now a dead man's key had opened a box across a lake. Inside it was a photograph of a German shepherd Everett had never heard of, a whistle using a training language Vesper somehow knew, and a map pointing toward a building Everett could not remember, except for the brief sensation of thunder in the dark. He had come to Northglass, planning to endure 30 days. For the first time, Everett wondered whether the harder thing would be leaving before he understood why part of him seemed to have been here all along. Noah found the theater because of a hand-painted sign in the window of a bookstore. Old film projectors repaired here. The sign had probably been hanging there longer than Noah had been alive. By 11 that morning, the three of them were standing beneath the faded marquee of the White Pine Picture House, a narrow brick theater wedged between a pharmacy and a closed insurance office on Main Street. The building looked as if it had survived every decade by refusing to notice when one ended. Its red brick facade had been darkened by years of snow and rain. 3 brass-framed poster cases still lined the entrance, though 2 held local charity flyers instead of movie advertisements. The marquee letters were missing several bulbs. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of dust, carpet cleaner, old popcorn, and the peculiar dry warmth of heating vents that had been running since dawn. Mara Bell stood near the ticket counter waiting for them. She had traded her dark green cafe apron for the same rust-red quilted vest over her cream thermal shirt, dark brown work pants, and weathered tan ankle boots. Her brown and silver hair was tied low at the back of her neck, and her amber brown eyes held the patient amusement of someone who had already decided Everett would resist help and had chosen not to care. Beside her stood a thin man Everett had never seen. Everett, Mara said, this is Walter Haynes. He owns the place, repairs the machines, and complains whenever anyone under 60 touches anything with gears. Walter Haynes looked to be about 73, tall but stooped enough that age had stolen several visible inches from him. His face was narrow and bony with pale skin, a long nose, and an uneven gray mustache that suggested he trimmed it only when it began interfering with coffee. His hair was almost entirely white and combed straight back, exposing a high forehead. Thick black-framed glasses magnified light blue eyes that seemed permanently skeptical. He wore a brown cardigan over a pale blue shirt, charcoal slacks, and old black shoes polished carefully despite cracked leather. Walter looked at Noah. You the one who found the reel? No, but I'm the one who knew what 8mm was. Walter grunted. Barely qualifies you as civilized. Noah smiled. Everett liked the old man immediately. Walter's gaze shifted to Vesper. The German shepherd stood beside Everett in his dark olive working harness, black and tan coat clean despite the wet ground outside, amber eyes moving steadily over the unfamiliar lobby. His right hind leg had been mildly stiff that morning, but he bore weight evenly now. Walter nodded toward him. Dog coming in, yes? Does he bark during movies? Only bad ones. Walter stared at Everett. Then his mustache moved. Maybe a smile, maybe not. Fine. They followed him down a short hallway and into a smaller screening room near the back. The room seated perhaps 40 people. Most of the burgundy velvet seats had been patched at least once. A square projection window opened from the booth behind them. Walter took the film reel from Everett as if accepting a fragile religious artifact. Dry storage? As far as I can tell. No vinegar smell? No. That's good. He held the reel toward the light. Could still snap. Could have shrinkage. Could have mold. Noah leaned closer. So maybe we shouldn't run it? Walter looked offended. Then why are you in a theater? He disappeared into the projection booth. Everett chose a seat near the aisle. Habit. Noah sat beside him. Mara took the row behind. Vesper settled at Everett's boots. The lights dimmed. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the projector came alive with a mechanical flutter. White light struck the screen, the image jumped, scratches, dust, a flash of overexposed sky. And then, Northglass. Not the Northglass Everett knew. This one was alive. The motel appeared beneath bright summer sun, cedar siding warm and clean, flower boxes mounted beneath the office windows. Cars filled the gravel lot. The roadside sign stood straight, every letter intact. People moved everywhere. Some were families, some wore work clothes, some walked with canes or uneven steps Everett recognized immediately. Veterans. A young man in the film stood beside a picnic table, laughing while a German shepherd nudged his hand. Another man sat in a folding chair with an artificial lower leg exposed beneath shorts, tossing a rubber ball to a black Labrador. A woman in her 30s practiced obedience commands with a sable shepherd while a small boy chased soap bubbles nearby. Everett leaned forward. This wasn't a normal motel. Mara answered quietly behind him. No. He turned slightly. You knew? Parts of it. That would have been useful yesterday. Mara did not apologize. You weren't ready to hear it yesterday. Everett's jaw tightened. The film continued. A handwritten title card appeared. Northglass Working Dog Weekend, July 1994, Noah whispered. Working Dog Weekend? On screen, Gideon Rourke crossed the lawn. Everett recognized him immediately. His father was younger than in the photograph they had found. Dark brown hair, neatly combed, broad shoulders beneath the dark charcoal wool coat he always seemed to favor even outdoors, white dress shirt, deep burgundy tie, dark tailored trousers, polished brown shoes that clearly did not belong anywhere near wet grass. His square face carried the same strong jaw Everett had inherited, though Gideon's blue-gray eyes were colder and more guarded. He stopped beside a large German shepherd, Argos. The dog was powerful without heaviness, dark saddle across the back, tan legs, erect ears, and the measured stillness common to working dogs that had learned the world often became clearer by watching instead of moving. Gideon crouched. Everett had almost never seen his father crouch for anyone. Argos pushed his head against Gideon's chest. Gideon smiled. Not the tight social smile Everett remembered from board dinners, a real one. It disappeared so quickly Everett wondered whether he had imagined it. Noah looked at him. You ever see Grandpa like that? Everett kept his eyes on the screen. No. That one syllable cost more than he expected. The real advanced. Different summers, different dates. Northglass remained busy. A simple wooden training course appeared behind the manager's cottage. Direction markers had been fixed to trees. Dogs worked through search drills. Older veterans watched younger handlers. Families ate together beneath pines. Everett began to understand why the old place had felt strangely different from a dead business. It had not only been a motel. It had been a place where people arrived carrying things they could not leave in the car, and Gideon had paid for it. That fact sat badly inside Everett, not because it was ugly, because it was kind. Everett had spent 19 years constructing a version of his father he could survive without. Greedy, cold, transactional. A man who measured land by acreage, employees by productivity, and love by obedience. Now an old film was placing another man beside him. A man who had apparently spent money on veterans and dogs, without attaching the Rourke name to a marble wall. Everett resented the contradiction. People were easier to leave behind when they remained simple. Noah shifted. You okay? Watching a movie. You're doing the jaw thing. I don't have a jaw thing. You definitely have a jaw thing. Mara spoke softly from behind. He did care about this place. Everett looked over his shoulder. You sound like you're defending him. I'm telling you something true. That's not the same thing. No. Mara met his eyes, and one true thing doesn't erase another. That answer stopped him. He turned back to the screen. The film flickered, and suddenly Everett saw a child running across the lawn. He stopped breathing. The boy was about 7, dark brown hair, skin tanned from summer, long legs not yet grown into themselves. He wore a red t-shirt and jeans rolled at the ankles. Argos ran beside him. The boy threw a stick badly. Argos retrieved it anyway. The camera moved closer. The child laughed. Everett knew the laugh before he recognized the face. His own. Noah whispered, "That's you." Everett did not answer. The boy on screen stumbled. Argos stopped immediately and turned back. 7-year-old Everett wrapped both arms around the dog's neck. Argos stood still and accepted the affection with solemn patience. The image jumped. Another angle. Everett asleep on a picnic blanket, one hand tangled in Argos's fur. Gideon stood several yards away speaking to someone off camera. He looked toward his son. For a few seconds, Gideon simply watched him. No impatience, no command, no criticism. Just watching. Everett felt something open in his chest that he had not given permission to move. A memory tried to surface. Hot grass beneath bare forearms, dog fur against his cheek, thunder far away, then nothing. The picture snapped back into focus. Everett stood abruptly, the seat folded behind him with a sharp clap. Vesper rose at once. Noah looked up. "Uncle Everett, I need air." Walter's voice came through the projection window opening. "Don't touch the reel." Everett walked into the hallway. Vesper followed. Outside the screening room, the air was cooler. Everett put both hands against the wall. His pulse had accelerated. He hated that. He had endured gunfire with a slower heart rate. Vesper moved beside his left leg. The German shepherd did not paw him or whine. He simply leaned his shoulder lightly against Everett's knee. The contact was careful because both of them had learned where the other hurt. Everett looked down. "I forgot him." Vesper looked up. Everett swallowed. "I forgot the whole damn dog." The words sounded absurd aloud, but the grief behind them did not. Then Vesper did something Everett had not expected. He lifted his muzzle toward Everett's hand. Not asking for affection, Everett had kept the old brass whistle in his jacket pocket without thinking about it. Vesper's nose touched the fabric once. Then the dog turned his head toward the closed screening room door. Waited. Everett stared at him. A strange thought moved through him. Not supernatural, not rational either. Maybe memory was not always a picture waiting in the mind. Maybe sometimes it was a pattern the body recognized first. A posture, a sound, a dog choosing to stay beside a frightened man. Everett rested one hand on Vesper's head. "Yeah," he whispered. "We're going back in." The second half of the reel was different. Summer gave way to colder weather. The filming became less casual, fewer families, more maps, more adults in conversation. A title card identified one man. Dr. Elias Pike, hydrology consultant. Pike looked to be in his late 40s in the film, tall and lean with narrow shoulders, a long, angular face, light skin weathered by fieldwork, and sandy brown hair thinning at the crown. A close-trimmed beard followed his jaw, more practical than stylish. Wire-rimmed glasses sat low on his nose. He wore an olive-field shirt beneath a tan utility jacket, dark work trousers, and mud-stained hiking boots. Even without sound, Pike's personality came through clearly. Precise, intense, restless. He pointed often, not dramatically but with the impatience of a man frustrated by people who had not yet understood something obvious to him. Gideon stood opposite him. Behind them lay a table covered in glass sample bottles, topographic maps, and handwritten logs. The film had no synchronized audio, but at some point someone had recorded short magnetic sound segments separately and spliced them into the later transfer. Walter slowed the projector and adjusted another device. Static filled the room, then Pike's voice. "Northridge samples are wrong." Gideon replied. "Wrong how? Not wrong, wrong enough." A burst of static swallowed several words. Pike pointed at the map. "Movement through fractured rock. If it reaches the lower aquifer." The audio died, the images continued. Gideon looked angry, Pike looked more angry. Noah leaned forward. "What were they testing?" Everett said. "Water." Mara whispered. "Pike used to carry those bottles everywhere." "You knew him too?" Everett asked, only as a guest. The next film fragment showed Gideon and Pike inside the Northglass office. The camera had been left running from across the room. Sound returned midway through an argument. Pike said, "You don't understand what they'll do if this gets out uncontrolled." Gideon's reply came sharp. "I understand exactly what happens if you talk before we're ready." Pike stepped closer. Gideon said the next line slowly enough that every word landed. "If Pike talks before we're ready, everything falls apart." The film cut. Black screen. Everett sat motionless. Noah looked at him. That sounded bad. "Yes." Mara said nothing. The projector resumed. A final date appeared. October 2004, another German shepherd crossed the frame. Same dark saddle. Same erect ears. Same broad head. Everett leaned forward. "Argos?" Noah looked at the earlier handwritten dates. "He'd be, 17?" Everett did the math. "Too old. Possible in theory, but highly unlikely for a dog moving with that strength." The film ended seconds later. The projector spun empty. Walter turned on the lights. No one spoke for a while. Everett looked toward Mara. "When did Pike disappear?" Her expression changed. "You know about that?" "Not yet." Noah was already pulling out his phone. "Library." Everett looked at him. "What? If this happened in 2004, local papers probably archived it." Walter appeared in the aisle. "County library has microfilm." Noah pointed at him. "Civilized." Walter looked offended again. The White Pine County Library occupied a modest stone building behind the post office. 2 hours later, Noah found the article. The headline was small. Local hydrologist reported missing Elias Pike, 49, had failed to return home after fieldwork near Lake Arden. His truck had later been found at a regional bus terminal. No body, no arrest, no confirmed evidence of foul play. 3 days later, Another article mentioned Northglass suspending operations for the season. It never reopened. Everett read both pieces twice. Noah watched him. "You think Grandpa did something?" Everett kept reading. "I think two things happened very close together. That's not what I asked." Everett folded his arms. Gideon had money. Pike had information. They were arguing about water. Pike vanished. Northglass closed. Noah's voice became quieter. "You think he killed him?" "No." The answer came too fast. Everett corrected himself. "I don't know." That uncertainty was worse. Gideon had been ruthless in business. Everett knew that. But murder? His mind resisted it, then remembered how little he had truly known. They returned to Northglass before sunset. Everett carried the brass whistle. Not because he believed it contained answers, because it was one of the few objects connecting the past to something measurable. Behind the manager's cottage, several trees still bore small weathered metal tabs. Everett had dismissed them as utility markers. Now, looking at the old training cards, he recognized directional symbols. He tried the whistle once. Vesper's ears rose. The dog moved toward the nearest marker. Everett did not command a full search. He simply followed. Noah came behind. The path climbed gradually through pines. Old markers appeared every 30 or 40 yards, some nearly swallowed by bark. The route ended in a clearing. 11 flat stones stood beneath the trees, a working dog cemetery. Each stone was modest, name, years, sometimes one line. Everett walked slowly among them. Ranger, Moley, Duke, Sobel, then Argos, 1987-1998. He found the way home. Everett stopped. Noah read the dates. The dog in the 2004 film wasn't him. No, the realization shifted the mystery. Gideon had not kept one remarkable dog. He had kept something going, a program, a line, a method. Vesper moved toward the edge of the cemetery, stopped, alerted. Everett watched carefully. The dog faced an empty patch of ground. No grave marker, no visible object. Everett knelt and inspected the area. Nothing. He moved leaves aside, damp soil, roots, no box, no metal, no scent he could detect. Vesper maintained focus. Everett tried a second angle. Still nothing. His first uncomfortable thought came quickly. Maybe Vesper was wrong. The dog was 8, injured. Cold weather affected him. Everett had spent years trusting Vesper's alerts in places where mistakes carried consequences. The idea of that reliability fading hurt far more than it should have. "Come on," Everett said softly. Vesper hesitated, then followed. Mara solved part of it the next morning. When Everett described the cemetery, she nodded. Storm in 2014 took down 3 trees there. County volunteers helped clear it. Were markers moved? Some. Anything buried? Probably half the hillside by accident. Everett went back with Noah and a small hand trowel. This time he widened the search around Vesper's alert point. 6 inches down, Noah struck wood. They uncovered a rectangular training block, weather-blackened but intact. Not treasure, not human remains, just an old scent and direction marker. Everett sat back on his heels. Vesper had not been wrong. He had reacted to a familiar category of object buried where renovations had displaced it. Everett rubbed the dog's neck. "Sorry, buddy." Noah heard. "You apologize to him faster than you apologize to people. He has a better record." Noah nodded. "Fair." Everett turned the wooden block over. A faded symbol had been burned into the underside. Mountain Ridge. Paw. Below it, SG. Noah looked at the letters. Initials? Probably. They carried the block back to Mara. She recognized them immediately. Silas Greer. Everett waited. Who? Mara set down the mug she was drying. "The last K9 trainer who worked Northglass full-time. Still alive, as far as I know." "Where?" Mara hesitated. "North of here. Lives outside Ironwood Ridge." "What does he know?" She gave Everett a tired look. "You ask that like old men come with indexes." "Did he know Gideon?" "Yes." "Pike?" "Yes." "Argos?" At that, Mara's expression shifted. "Better than almost anyone." Everett looked toward the cafe window. Vesper lay outside beneath the awning, black and tan coat bright in the cold sun, head resting on his front paws. Noah stood beside the counter, holding the old wooden marker. Everything still pointed toward Gideon, toward Pike, toward 22 years of silence. Everett had entered the day believing the film might answer why Northglass mattered. Instead, it had made his father more difficult to understand. Gideon had funded veterans, loved a dog, kept a secret program alive, argued with a hydrologist who later disappeared, then closed the place forever. Good deeds did not erase ugly possibilities, and ugly possibilities did not erase what Everett had seen on the screen. His father watching a 7-year-old boy sleep beside a German shepherd. Everett had wanted a clean answer. Instead, Northglass kept giving him contradictions. He looked at Mara. "How do I find Silas?" Mara reached for a notepad. As she wrote, Everett felt the old instincts settle back into place. Not anger, not grief. Investigation. If Gideon Rourke had hidden something here, Everett intended to uncover it, even if the answer proved that the dead man had been worse than he remembered. And somewhere beneath that resolve was a quieter fear Everett did not want to name. What if Gideon had been better, too? Silas Greer lived 23 miles north of White Pine Crossing in a place that barely qualified as a town. The road narrowed after the last gas station, then became a 2-lane strip of cracked asphalt, threading through red pine and white birch. Overnight temperatures had dropped hard enough to leave thin skins of ice over roadside puddles. Sunlight flashed between the trees, bright and cold, and the sky had the clear washed blue color that often followed several days of northern rain. Everett drove slowly, not because the road demanded it, because Vesper's right hind leg had been stiff that morning, and every bump made the German shepherd adjust his weight. Noah noticed Everett glancing at the rearview mirror. "He's fine." Everett kept his eyes on the road. "I didn't say anything. You don't have to." Vesper was stretched across the folded rear seat in his dark olive working harness, black and tan coat catching strips of pale sunlight. His amber eyes were half closed, but one ear remained angled toward Everett's voice. Noah looked back at him. "He's going to outlive both of us out of spite. Mostly you." "Fair." The humor faded when they turned onto a narrow gravel drive marked by a small mailbox painted dark green. At the end stood a weathered cedar house beside an old barn and a fenced training field long gone to tall winter grass. A man was waiting on the porch. Silas Greer was 79, about 5'10" before age had compressed him slightly. Lean without appearing frail, his posture still surprisingly straight. His hands were large and rough, knuckles swollen from decades of cold weather and leash work. His face was long and deeply lined with prominent cheekbones, pale blue eyes, short white hair, and uneven white stubble along his jaw. He wore a weathered brown canvas chore coat over a forest green wool shirt, dark work trousers, old brown lace-up boots, and a faded canvas cap that looked older than Noah. Nothing about him suggested he enjoyed visitors. Silas watched Everett step from the Suburban, then Noah, then Vesper. His expression changed only when the dog appeared. Vesper jumped down carefully, landing evenly. Silas's pale eyes narrowed. Not suspicion, recognition of type. "Bring him here." Everett did not move. Silas looked at him. "That wasn't an order to you." "I know." "Good," Noah muttered. "This is going well." Silas heard him. "Kid's got ears. So does the dog," Noah replied. Silas's mouth twitched. Everett led Vesper closer. The old trainer did not reach for him immediately. He stood still, allowing the German shepherd to inspect him first. "Good." Everett noticed everything about the interaction. Vesper approached, sniffed Silas's boots, trouser cuff, and right hand. Silas finally offered 2 fingers below muzzle level. Vesper smelled them. His tail moved once. Silas exhaled. "Well." Everett waited. Silas looked along Vesper's body carefully. The dark saddle, head shape, shoulder width, ear carriage, the slightly silvered muzzle. 8? Yes. Working years, most of them. Injury? Right hind. Fragment damage, shoulder too. Silas nodded. "Still compensating well. You can see that. I spent 50 years watching dogs move because they couldn't tell me where it hurt." He looked at Everett. "People are worse. They can tell you and usually don't." Noah smiled. Everett did not, but he understood the accusation. Silas turned toward the house. "Coffee's bad. Come in anyway." The inside of Silas's home was warmer than Everett expected, not decorative. Functional. A wood stove occupied one corner. Shelves held veterinary manuals, old training binders, black and white photographs, faded competition ribbons, and dozens of collars hanging from wooden pegs. No mounted medals, no sentimental signs about dogs being angels, just evidence of work. Vesper settled beside Everett's chair. Silas poured coffee into 4 mugs, realized there were only 3 humans, and put the 4th back without explanation. Noah noticed. "Habit?" Silas glanced at the unused mug. "Wife, nothing else." The answer contained enough finality that Noah did not ask. Silas sat across from Everett. "You brought the marker?" Everett placed the weather-darkened wooden training block on the table. Silas did not touch it immediately. His pale eyes went to the burned mountain and paw symbol, then to the initials. "You made it," Everett said. Silas nodded. "Probably 30 years ago." "For what?" "Directional work, search transitions, early versions." Everett took the brass whistle from his jacket and placed it beside the block. Silas stared at that longer. "You found this too?" "At Northglass." Where Everett did not answer. Silas looked up. "Still navy in your head." "Seal. Same disease." Noah looked between them. "What disease?" Thinking the first person who asks a question is automatically entitled to nothing. Everett said, "Usually kept people alive." Silas's expression softened by 1 degree. "Sometimes." He picked up the whistle. "Your dog responded to this?" "Yes." Silas turned it between his fingers. "He would. Everett leaned forward. Why? Because this isn't some family magic trick. Good, I don't believe in those either. Silas looked toward Vesper. Northglass ran a working dog program before people liked calling everything a program. We tested simple directional cue systems, hand signals, tone patterns, whistle frequency combinations. Some of the material was later shared with civilian search and rescue groups, police trainers, then federal working dog instructors. Noah frowned. So Vesper knows something invented here? Not exactly. Silas tapped the whistle. Training systems evolve. Nobody owns them forever. But certain patterns persist because they work. Everett understood immediately. A lineage of method, not memory, not instinct inherited through blood. Just humans teaching dogs, then teaching other humans who taught other dogs. Silas added, there was also breeding. Everett looked at him. Argos. Silas's eyes shifted. So you know the name? I saw him on film. Then you saw the beginning. He stood and crossed to one of the shelves. From a drawer he removed a thick folder. Inside were old pedigree sheets, veterinary records, handwritten notes, photographs. Silas pushed one page toward Everett. Argos appeared near the top. Below it, branching names. Different kennels, different handlers, different decades. Everett's eyes followed the lines. Eventually Silas placed one finger on a later branch. Here, a familiar designation. Vesper's breeder line. Everett stared at it. Noah leaned over his shoulder. You're serious? Usually, Everett looked at Vesper. The dog was lying on the floor, completely uninterested in the historical significance of his ancestry. Silas said, he's several generations removed. Don't turn it into mythology. I wasn't going to. No, the kid was. Noah held up both hands. I hadn't even said anything. You have a mythological face. That earned a short laugh. Even Everett could not stop it. Silas leaned back. Argos was special because of what he did, not because his grandchildren carried secret knowledge. That's what I needed to know, Everett said. Silas studied him. No, that's what you wanted to know. Everett said nothing. Silas's gaze sharpened. What you need to know is what your father did after Argos died. Gideon Rourke had apparently hated dogs before Argos. That revelation was almost funny. Silas told it without smiling. He thought they smelled. Shed. Interrupted meetings. First month he complained every day. How did he end up with one? Argos belonged to a veteran named Daniel Shaw. Shaw died suddenly. Gideon had helped fund the man's treatment through Northglass. Silas paused. Dog wouldn't leave the property, so my father kept him. Your father tried to give him away 6 times. Noah leaned forward. What happened? Argos came back 6 times? 5th time Gideon drove him himself 70 miles south. Noah smiled. And dog came back 2 days later. Everett imagined Gideon losing an argument to a German shepherd. For the first time in years, the thought of his father was almost warm. Silas continued. After that, Gideon gave up pretending the decision was his. The story unsettled Everett more than he expected, because it sounded like something his father might actually have done. Control everything, until something refused to be controlled. Silas explained that Argos changed Gideon's relationship with Northglass. The place had begun as a modest property investment and seasonal lodge. Over time, Gideon allowed it to become a gathering point for veterans, handlers, and working dog programs. Not charity in the way people like to photograph, Silas said. He hated ceremonies, hated plaques. If somebody tried naming a wing after him, he threatened to stop writing checks. Everett looked down. That doesn't sound like him. Silas's pale eyes hardened. You knew your father as a father. That was enough. No, it was one version. And you knew him as what? A rich man with too much pride and one dog who didn't care. Everett's jaw tightened. Silas noticed. Don't confuse explanation with defense. That stopped him. Silas continued more quietly. Gideon could be cruel. I saw it. He could destroy a man in a meeting and sleep fine afterward. He thought money made him smarter than consequences. Everett looked up. Then why are we doing this? Because people are rarely kind enough to be only one thing. The sentence remained between them. Silas stood, walked to a wooden cabinet, and removed a small framed photograph. He set it in front of Everett, Claire. Not as Everett remembered her near the end. Younger, maybe 30. Claire Rourke Mercer had been of average height, slender without looking fragile, with fair skin that freckled easily, shoulder-length chestnut brown hair, and soft hazel eyes that could become stubborn in a second. She had inherited less of Gideon's hard angles than Everett had. Her face was oval, her smile warm but slightly asymmetrical, as though amusement always reached one side first. In the photograph, she stood beside Gideon outside Northglass. She was holding a little boy, Noah, maybe 2 years old. Everett stared so long the room disappeared. Noah leaned closer. That's me. Silas nodded. Claire brought him up. Everett looked at the old man. When? More than once. Silas reached into the frame backing and removed a folded photocopy. Your sister left this after one visit. Everett unfolded it. The handwriting was Claire's. Only one sentence had been preserved. Dad, one of you has to call first. Everett could not breathe properly for several seconds. 19 years. He had always pictured the silence as a wall Gideon built. Now Claire's handwriting made it look more like a wall both men had stood behind, each waiting for the other to admit it existed. Noah sat beside him. He did not ask whether Everett was all right. He was learning better questions. Did Mom ever tell you she came here? No. Everett's voice sounded rough. Why not? I don't know, Silas answered instead. Maybe she got tired of translating love between two men who only spoke pride. Everett looked sharply at him. Silas did not look away. No insult, no pity, just an old man stating what he believed. Everett folded the note carefully. For years he had believed Claire chose neutrality. Now he understood she had been doing work none of them had thanked her for. Carrying photographs, carrying news, trying to keep a grandfather connected to a grandson, trying to convince one stubborn man to call another. And then she died. The bridge vanished. Both shores stayed where they were. Everett closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, Vesper had moved closer. The dog's head rested against Noah's boot. Not Everett's. That mattered. For once, the comfort in the room did not have to belong to him. Silas waited until Everett was ready before speaking again. It was one of the first things about him that Everett genuinely respected. No rush, no soft voice, no hand on the shoulder, just time. Eventually, Everett asked, "Tell me about Pike." Silas's expression changed. The warmth left it. Elias Pike was difficult. So was my father. Different kind. Silas scratched his white stubble. Pike believed data was a moral obligation. If numbers said something was wrong, he acted like everybody had a duty to stop eating lunch until it was fixed. Noah said, "I kind of like him." "You would have lasted 20 minutes," Silas continued. Pike started coming to Northglass to test groundwater and surface runoff. At first, nothing unusual. Gideon owned land around Lake Arden. Rich men like knowing whether their land is sinking, flooding, poisoning people. Whatever keeps insurance companies awake. What changed? Northridge. Everett remembered the film. The samples. Silas nodded. Pike found something, never told me exactly what, but he left markers. Silas glanced at the wooden block. Survey routes hidden among K9 training markers. Smart idea. Nobody paid attention to dog equipment. Why hide them? Because by then Pike thought someone was watching where he sampled. Who? Didn't know. Did Gideon? Silas's eyes sharpened. Maybe. Everett leaned forward. What happened the night Pike disappeared? Silas did not answer immediately. He stood and added another piece of wood to the stove. Flames caught. When you watched that film, did Gideon say Pike couldn't talk? Yes. Exact words. Everett repeated them. Silas nodded slowly. That wasn't the whole conversation. Everett felt something shift. I heard him later. When? Same week. Silas turned. Your father was on the phone in the kennel office. He didn't know I was in the back room. What did he say? Silas' pale eyes held Everett's. He said, if they know what Pike found, he won't make it to morning. Noah sat straighter. Everett's mind replayed the film. If Pike talks before we're ready, everything falls apart. He had heard threat. Silas's version changed the grammar of the entire event. Not keep Pike quiet. Keep Pike alive. Everett refused to accept it too quickly. Who was they? Don't know. Did Gideon help Pike leave? Don't know. Did you ever see Pike again? No. Did my father? I don't know. Everett stood. Frustration moved through him. You knew both men. You worked there. You heard the call. How do you know nothing? Silas did not react. Because real life is mostly people knowing pieces. That answer was infuriating. Because it was true, Silas added. You want a confession? I don't have one. What do you have, a name? Dr. Naomi Vale worked out of a small field research facility attached to a regional environmental institute outside Marquette. Everett called first. She did not agree to meet until he mentioned Elias Pike. Even then, her response was cautious. Bring copies, not originals. They arrived the next afternoon. Naomi Vale was 52, about 5'6", with a trim, outdoors hardened build, and the easy balance of someone accustomed to uneven ground. Her face was oval but slightly angular through the cheekbones, her skin fair with light sun exposure across the nose and forehead, and her gray-green eyes had the steady, evaluating quality of a person who distrusted conclusions that arrived before evidence. Her ash-brown hair, streaked with silver, was cut to chin length. She wore a slate-blue waterproof field jacket over a plain thermal layer, dark khaki field pants, brown waterproof hiking boots, and a black field notebook case slung across her body. She shook Everett's hand once, firm, brief. Then she crouched to Vesper's level without touching him. Working dog? Retired. May I? Everett nodded. Vesper smelled her hand. Naomi scratched once beneath his chin, then stood. No fuss. Everett liked her immediately. Her office was half laboratory, half storage room. Maps covered one wall. Sample jars filled shelves. A computer displayed colored groundwater layers Everett did not understand. Naomi spread copies of Pike's map and the training cards across a large table. For nearly 10 minutes, she said nothing. Noah shifted. Everett waited. Naomi finally pointed to a cluster of symbols. These aren't dog directions. Silas, who had joined by speakerphone, objected through Everett's phone. They are. Naomi shook her head. They're both. That silenced everyone. She aligned Pike's old map with a modern topographic sheet. What looks like a directional sequence corresponds to slope breaks, shallow wells, drainage lines, and fracture zones. Everett leaned closer. Meaning, Pike hit a hydrogeological survey inside a training system. Noah blinked. Why? Because someone looking for environmental records wouldn't recognize it. Naomi traced a line north of Lake Arden. This is North Ridge. Her finger moved downward. Water falling here can travel through fractured bedrock. Not quickly like a river, but groundwater doesn't care about property lines. She opened another file. There was an industrial operation north of this area in the late 80s and early 90s. Metal processing, chemical treatment, waste storage. Still active, not in its original form. What happened to the waste? Naomi looked at Everett. That is the question Pike appears to have been asking. She explained that older industrial sites sometimes stored waste in drums or lined pits under regulations far weaker than modern standards. If containers corroded over decades, seasonal freeze-thaw cycles and groundwater movement could carry contaminants away from the original site. Toward Lake Arden? Noah asked. Potentially. Wouldn't somebody know by now? Not necessarily. Groundwater contamination can migrate slowly. Monitoring can miss narrow plumes. Ownership changes. Records disappear. Companies merge. Everett folded his arms, and Pike found evidence. Possibly. Naomi refused to move faster than the records allowed. Everett respected that even when it frustrated him. She examined one of the copied development documents they had gathered from county archives, then stopped. Her finger rested on a signature, Gideon Rourke. Everett stared at it. What is that? Investment authorization. For the industrial site, for a parent development partnership. Naomi turned another page. A capital contribution schedule. Rourke Holdings, millions. No ambiguity. Everett felt his stomach harden. The correction he had allowed Silas to make only hours earlier began collapsing. Maybe Gideon had tried to protect Pike. Fine. But now there was proof he had profited from the project itself, Everett said. He knew. Naomi shook her head. Don't jump. His name is on it. That proves investment. It does not prove knowledge of illegal disposal. He signed. Yes. He made money. Yes, Naomi met his eyes. Facts are strong enough without adding what you want them to mean. That irritated him. Because again, it was true. Everett looked at Noah. The boy had gone quiet. Noah had spent days watching the image of his grandfather change shape. Cold businessman. Secret supporter of veterans. Man who loved a dog. Possible protector of Pike. Now investor in the same industrial operation Pike feared. No clean version survived. Everett understood that feeling. Naomi moved to another map. There's more. She pulled up modern property records. Colored parcels appeared around Lake Arden and stretching northward. Many were held under names Everett did not recognize. Northline Habitat LLC, Arden Waters Conservancy, Birch Crown Easement Trust, Superior Headwaters Holdings shell entities. At first glance unrelated. Naomi tapped several. Same registered management structure. Everett frowned. Who? She enlarged a document. Gideon Rourke's private asset office. Everett stared. Naomi continued. These acquisitions started approximately 22 years ago, when Northglass closed. Yes. Why buy all this? Look. She layered Pike's groundwater map beneath the property boundaries. The colored parcels formed a broken corridor. North Ridge, down gradient forest, wetlands, streams, Lake Arden. Noah whispered. He bought the path. Naomi looked at him. That's one way to describe it. Everett felt something uncomfortable move through him. How much land? Thousands of acres directly. More if easements are included. Why? Naomi closed one file. I can tell you what the geometry suggests. Everett waited. Someone was trying to control development across the likely groundwater migration corridor. To hide contamination, possibly. Everett's eyes narrowed. Naomi continued before he could answer. Or to prevent construction from worsening it. Silence. Two explanations. Same land, same money, opposite moral meaning. Everett hated that Northglass kept doing this to him. Every answer opened in two directions. Naomi pointed to Gideon's earliest investment document. He helped build the problem. Then she pointed to the later land acquisitions. and later he spent a great deal of money buying the landscape downstream from it. Noah asked quietly, "Can both be true?" Naomi looked at him. "Usually the hardest histories are the ones where they are." Everett stared at his father's signature. Gideon had not been falsely accused by circumstance. He had invested, profited, signed. Whatever he later tried to repair could not erase that. But neither could the original wrong explain 22 years of buying land that produced little visible return. Everett had spent almost 2 decades believing judgment was simple. His father had been wrong. Everett had left. Case closed. Now the dead man had become harder to condemn, precisely because Everett had found proof that condemnation was deserved. He had done harm. And then, apparently, he had tried to stop the harm from traveling farther. Everett looked through the window. Vesper sat outside beside Noah's chair, ears upright, watching wind move through bare branches. The dog knew nothing about Gideon's guilt, nothing about redemption, nothing about investment agreements or groundwater. Vesper understood simpler things: stay, search, protect, return. Maybe humans complicated morality because humans were the ones who needed forgiveness. Everett gathered the papers slowly. Naomi stopped him. "If you want the truth, don't decide who your father was yet." Everett looked at her. "I knew him." "No." Her voice stayed calm. "You knew what he did to you." The words hit harder than accusation, she added. "That's real, but it isn't the entire record." Everett said nothing. He placed Gideon's signed investment document beside the map of the properties purchased years later. Cause beside attempted correction. Greed beside responsibility. A man capable of both. For the first time since learning Gideon was dead, Everett stopped asking whether his father had been good or bad. The question suddenly seemed too small. The better question was harder. What had Gideon done after he understood what his choices had cost? Everett looked down at the corridor of land surrounding Lake Arden. 22 years of purchases, 22 years of silence. And somewhere inside that silence, Elias Pike had vanished. The answer was not absolution, not yet. Maybe never. But Everett finally understood one thing. Whatever Gideon had hidden at Northglass, he had not spent the last 2 decades merely hiding from his mistake. He had been trying to stand in front of it. The legal documents did not look like $200 million. They looked like what Everett had always hated about money. Stacks of paper, signatures, easements, parcel numbers, percentages, tax language, and sentences so long they seemed designed to exhaust a person before the truth reached the period. 3 days after meeting Naomi Vale, Everett sat at a scarred conference table in a small office above White Pine Crossing's hardware store with Noah on one side and Vesper lying beneath the window. Across from them sat Naomi and a lawyer Everett had never met. Her name was Rebecca Sloan. Rebecca was 47, medium height, slim without looking delicate, with light olive skin, dark brown eyes, and straight black hair cut just below her jaw. Her face was narrow, with a strong chin and a habit of pressing her lips together whenever she encountered language she considered deliberately evasive. She wore a dark gray wool blazer over a cream blouse, black trousers, low brown leather shoes, and reading glasses on a thin cord around her neck. Unlike Helen Ward, Rebecca was not attached to Gideon's estate. That mattered to Everett. Naomi had recommended her because Rebecca specialized in conservation easements, land trusts, and rural property structures. She had spent 20 years representing municipalities, family farms, and conservation groups in disputes where everybody believed the word ownership meant something simpler than it actually did. Rebecca pushed a color-coded map toward Everett. "Your father built this over time." Everett looked down. The map showed Lake Arden at the bottom, North Ridge near the top, and dozens of parcels spread between them in irregular pieces. Some were large blocks of forest. Others were narrow corridors. Several followed streams. A few looked nearly useless on their own. "What am I looking at?" "A conservation network that is legally incomplete." Noah leaned closer. Rebecca pointed with the pencil. "These green parcels are owned by Northglass Conservation Trust. These blue areas are conservation easements. These narrow yellow corridors involve water access protections, drainage restrictions, or development limitations." Everett tapped a red shape near the lake. "And that, Northglass Motor Lodge." He looked at Rebecca. "The motel is the missing piece, geographically and legally." Naomi opened another folder. "Your father acquired properties along the likely groundwater migration corridor for more than 2 decades. Some were purchased outright, some through shell conservation entities, some through easements negotiated with private owners." Rebecca added, "Most of those agreements were eventually consolidated into the Northglass Conservation Trust, except the motel." "Exactly." Everett leaned back. "Why?" Rebecca removed her glasses. Because Gideon Rourke designed the trust so that Northglass itself could only enter through a successor decision after his death. Noah frowned. He could have just put it in himself. Yes, so why didn't he? Rebecca looked at Everett. I can explain what he did. I can't tell you why. Everett almost laughed. That sentence had become the motto of Northglass. Rebecca continued. On the 30th day after you formally accepted title, a successor clause becomes available. You can elect to transfer Northglass into the trust and serve as interim steward while an independent board is established. Everett's eyes narrowed. And if I don't? The parcel remains separate. Other provisions activate later, such as potential sale, restructuring, or transfer subject to existing restrictions. Noah asked the question Everett had not yet wanted to ask. What's all of it worth? Rebecca glanced at Naomi. Naomi answered, depends what you mean by worth. Money. That came out harder than Noah intended. No one corrected him. Rebecca slid forward an appraisal packet. If the protected land, development rights, water rights, and strategic parcels were valued according to potential industrial, residential, recreational, and timber development, the aggregate estimate exceeds $200 million. Noah stared at her. Everett did not. He looked at the map. Can I sell $200 million worth of land? No. Can the trust? Not once the protections are fully activated, except under narrow replacement or conservation equivalent provisions. So it isn't money. Rebecca nodded. Correct. Noah's jaw tightened. It has a number, a valuation, $200 million. Yes. And we're living in an abandoned manager's cottage. Everett looked at him. No, I'm asking. Rebecca stayed silent. Good lawyer, Everett thought. She knew when a family argument was outside billable jurisdiction. Noah leaned back in his chair. We had to decide last month whether we could afford groceries and gas. You sleep sitting up half the time because your knee locks. Vesper needs another full orthopedic check. And now we find out Grandpa left something worth more than $200 million. But we're supposed to act like that isn't insane? It isn't ours to spend. You don't know that. I know what she just said. You always do that. Everett's voice cooled. Do what? Turn everything into a rule before anybody gets to feel anything about it. The room changed. Everett felt Naomi glance away. Noah continued. You did it after Mom died. Everett went still. You made schedules, paperwork, school counseling, food rides. You kept fixing things. I was responsible for you. Yeah. Noah's hazel green eyes were bright now, but he refused to look away. And did I ever get a vote? Everett said nothing. Noah pushed his chair back. We're homeless because you wouldn't ask anybody for help. Now there's land worth more money than I can even imagine. And you're already talking like the only honorable answer is to lock it away forever. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Everett's shoulders hardened. Noah's voice cracked, then steadied. How many people in this family have to lose everything just to prove they're good? Nobody moved. Vesper lifted his head from beneath the window. Everett looked at Noah and saw Claire for half a second. Not her face. Her refusal to retreat once she believed something mattered. That hurt more. Noah turned and left the room. The door shut behind him, not slammed. Somehow that was worse. Everett remained seated. Rebecca looked down at her papers. Naomi was the one who finally spoke. He's not wrong about one part. Everett looked at her. Which part? You've already begun treating the trust as a moral test. It is? No, it's a legal instrument with consequences. Everett's eyes narrowed. Naomi continued. You can make a principled decision and still hurt people. He looked toward the closed door. I know. No, I think you know how to sacrifice yourself. That's different. That landed too cleanly. Rebecca put her glasses back on. Everett, the trust decision is not due today. He looked at her. You have time to understand what the choice actually does. Everett glanced at the map again. $200 million. Not cash, not freedom, but not nothing. For the first time, he understood why Gideon had waited. The old man had not left him wealth. He had left him responsibility disguised as wealth. And responsibility had always been Everett's weakness. Not because he ran from it, because he could not stop taking it. By evening, White Pine Crossing had another problem to argue about. Ardent North Materials announced a public meeting at the town recreation hall. Everett had no intention of attending until Mara Bell called. You need to hear them before you decide what you think of them. I already know who owned the old industrial assets. That isn't the same as knowing who lives here now. He understood what she meant. He disliked it. So he went. The recreation hall filled beyond its folding chair capacity. Loggers, retired teachers, small business owners, young couples, men in work jackets with calloused hands, women still wearing scrubs from the clinic, a few college-aged kids home for winter. The crowd did not look like a mob waiting to be fooled by a corporation. It looked like a town tired of shrinking. Noah sat 3 chairs away from Everett. The distance was deliberate. Vesper lay at Everett's feet, dark olive harness against his black and tan coat. Mara sat on the opposite aisle. She looked uncomfortable. Everett noticed a young man beside her, maybe 26, broad through the shoulders but soft around the middle, with curly brown hair, a short beard, and tired blue eyes. Mara later introduced him quietly as her nephew Caleb Bell, recently laid off from a regional mill. Caleb wore a faded black work jacket, jeans, and scuffed steel-toe boots. He was polite, hopeful. That made things harder. Then Darren Vale walked onto the stage. He was 56, about 6 feet tall, fit in the controlled way of a man who still scheduled exercise. His face was long, his jaw clean and well-defined, his salt and pepper hair carefully combed, and his cool blue eyes moved across the room without appearing hurried. He wore a dark navy wool overcoat over a light blue dress shirt, charcoal trousers, black leather shoes, and a simple silver wristwatch. No flashy tie, no security detail, no theatrical arrogance. He looked like someone who knew exactly how much confidence was enough. White Pine Crossing doesn't need another speech about survival, Darren began. The room quieted. It needs jobs, a murmur of agreement. He spoke about Ardent North's proposed materials processing project, 300 construction jobs, nearly 200 permanent positions, contracts for local trucking, expanded tax revenue, new infrastructure, scholarships for technical training. He acknowledged the industrial history of the region without accepting responsibility for everything that happened before his company acquired the assets. "We are not the operators of 1992, he said. "We are accountable for what we build now." Everett watched the crowd. Darren was good. Worse, some of what he said was true. White Pine Crossing had lost population. Mara's Cafe survived partly because people drove 20 miles for pie and nostalgia. The hardware store closed 2 days a week. The regional mill had reduced shifts. Caleb Bell sat forward when Darren described apprenticeship positions. Mara saw it too. Her face tightened. Darren moved to environmental safeguards, closed-loop processing, modern liners, continuous groundwater monitoring, independent testing. He did not deny concern. He absorbed it into the presentation. That was more effective. During the question period, an elderly man near the back stood and said something Everett had not expected. "My son moved to Minnesota because there was nothing here. My granddaughter barely knows this town. If this project brings them home, you tell me what that's worth." Nobody applauded immediately. The silence was heavier than applause. Everett looked toward Noah. Noah was already looking at him. For the first time since their argument, neither looked angry. They looked trapped by the same truth. Saving land had a cost. So did losing it. Across the aisle, Mara lowered her eyes while Caleb stared at the employment chart projected on the wall. Vesper rested his chin on Everett's boot. Everett suddenly understood why easy villains were comforting. They gave a man permission to stop thinking. Darren Vale was not offering poison in a black bottle. He was offering paychecks. And that meant Everett could do the right thing for Lake Arden and still become the reason someone else's son never came home. The thought stayed with him long after the meeting ended. The next morning, Silas Greer called. Everett had sent him photographs of the old working dog cemetery. Silas's first words were, "You photographed it wrong. Good morning to you too. One stone is off." Everett sat up at the manager's cottage table. "Which one?" "4th row, left side." Everett enlarged the image. A flat memorial stone sat slightly crooked compared with the others. "I thought the storm moved them. Some. Not that one." "How do you know?" "Because I set the original line." Silas explained that Pike had sometimes used orientation markers when laying out field routes. A visible object could act as a baseline. A small deviation became a directional bearing. Everett went outside with a compass. Noah followed. They had not fully repaired the argument between them. But neither pretended nothing had happened. That was progress. At the cemetery, Everett measured the stone, 17 degrees off the common eastward alignment. Noah looked at him. 17 again. Everett did not answer. They called Naomi. Within an hour, the 3 of them were walking north through forest. Vesper came too, moving at a controlled pace. The bearing led across a low ridge, past an old drainage cut, then toward higher ground. Near noon, the trees opened around an abandoned fire lookout tower. The structure rose above the pines on a steel frame, weathered but still standing. The stairs had been removed from the bottom section years earlier to prevent climbing, but a maintenance ladder remained locked inside a fenced enclosure. Naomi checked the old county map. This tower was decommissioned in 2007. Noah looked up. So Pike could used it, possibly. Everett inspected the base. Nothing obvious. Then Vesper stopped beside a concrete footing. Not an alert, just interest. Everett knelt. A narrow metal access panel had been painted the same gray as the tower base. Rust sealed one edge. Noah used a flat tool from his canvas pouch. "Give me 2 minutes. 30 seconds. Why? Because I enjoy unreasonable management." Noah rolled his eyes. Together they worked the panel open. Inside was a weatherproof cavity, and inside that, a black archival case. No lock, no puzzle, just protection. Naomi put on nitrile gloves from her field case before touching anything. Photos first. Everett documented the case where it sat. Naomi recorded location, time, condition, and names present. Chain of custody. No improvisation. The box held old laboratory sheets, film negatives, photographs of rusting drums stacked in a cut hillside, hand-drawn plume maps, copies of financial transfers, and several signed development documents. One carried Gideon Rourke's signature. Again, this time the connection was closer. A project authorization related to infrastructure near the original industrial site. Everett stared at it. No defense left, no convenient distance. His father had not merely owned stock. He had helped move the project forward. Naomi turned over another document. Don't stop at one page. She found later correspondence. Gideon questioning waste handling costs. Pike requesting additional testing. Internal notes showing resistance from unnamed corporate partners. Not innocence, not redemption. A timeline, one in which Gideon participated before he resisted. Noah took photographs of everything. Naomi packed the documents into evidence sleeves she had brought. They worked for hours. By the time they returned to town, word had already begun moving. Somebody had seen Naomi's vehicle near the trailhead. A local reporter contacted Noah through social media. Her name was Erin Cole, 29, a regional news freelancer, with shoulder-length auburn hair, pale freckled skin, sharp brown eyes, and a reputation for publishing quickly when public records supported a story. Noah showed Everett the message. "If you found records connected to Pike or North Ridge, I can get this out tonight. People deserve to know." Noah stared at the screen. "You know what happens if we send them." Everett did. Tension, pressure, maybe protection, maybe chaos. Naomi read the message. "Do not send originals or full images yet." Noah frowned. "Why? We have not authenticated everything. They were inside a box hidden for 20 years. That proves where we found them. Not who created every page. Gideon's signature is right there, which needs comparison." Noah's frustration returned. "So we wait while a company keeps moving ahead. We verify. That sounds like how people bury things." Naomi did not take offense. Sometimes delay is cowardice. Sometimes delay is discipline. The difference is whether you're doing work during the waiting. Noah looked at Everett. Everett knew the temptation. Control. Press send. Force the world to react. He had lived most of his adult life in environments where acting first could save lives. He had also learned that acting on bad intelligence could destroy them. He said nothing. This had to be Noah's choice. Noah looked back at the message. His thumb hovered over the attachment icon. Then he locked the phone. "I'll wait." Everett felt something quietly shift between them. Not forgiveness, respect. Noah handed Naomi the image archive. "Make copies. Verify everything." Naomi nodded. "That's the right call." Noah shrugged. "Don't sound so surprised." Everett almost smiled. 2 days later, Naomi called from the field station. Her voice was different, tighter. "Come in." Everett brought Noah. Vesper remained in the Suburban because the facility was crowded with sampling equipment. Naomi had spread 3 laboratory reports across her desk. She pointed to one. "This is from a monitoring well installed years after Pike disappeared." Everett looked at the numbers. "They mean nothing to me. They mean something to me." Noah leaned in. Naomi explained that a compound associated with the historical industrial process had been detected at low concentration. Not immediately dangerous at the well. Not proof Lake Arden was contaminated, but consistent with the class of compounds Pike had warned about. Could it be from somewhere else? Yes. Could Pike have been right? Yes. Everett looked at her. "How fast is it moving? We don't know yet." Naomi showed them rainfall and groundwater data. "The last 2 months have been unusually wet. Saturation is high. If the plume exists where Pike modeled it, the hydraulic gradient may be stronger than in a normal year." Noah's face tightened. "So this is happening now. Possibly. Slowly. But yes, this is no longer just historical paperwork." Everett looked at Pike's map. One area remained poorly constrained. A gap in the old sample line. Naomi tapped it. "This is the problem." "What?" "The source location. They had evidence of contaminated groundwater, historical photographs of drums, financial links, Pike's model, but no confirmed coordinates for the primary disposal zone. Without that, an emergency containment order would be harder to justify." Everett studied the map. "Can we search it?" Not blindly. The area is large, partially overgrown, and some of it is old industrial ground. Noah asked. Pike knew where it was. Naomi nodded. I think so. Then why isn't it marked? Maybe the record is missing. Everett stared at the directional symbols along Pike's route. The old hydrologist had hidden survey logic inside a system most people would ignore. Working dog markers, bearings, field transitions, not riddles, a practical language. Outside the window, Vesper stood in the Suburban watching the building. Everett felt the shape of the problem settle into place. Northglass had begun as a dead man's inheritance, then a family secret, then evidence of an old wrong. Now the water beneath the forest was carrying that wrong forward. Whatever Gideon had tried to contain for 22 years had outlived him, and whatever Elias Pike had failed to finish was no longer waiting politely in the past. The weather changed before the forecast did. By 6 in the morning, the western sky over Lake Arden had turned the color of wet slate. Wind pressed low through the pines, making their tops lean and recover in slow waves. The lake itself remained calm near shore, but farther out its surface had darkened, textured by bands of colder air moving across it. Everett stood on the porch of the manager's cottage with a metal mug in one hand and watched the clouds gather. His left knee had started aching during the night. That told him enough. Behind him the cottage was quiet, except for the dry click of Noah sorting batteries on the kitchen table. Vesper lay near the door in his dark olive working harness, the black and tan German shepherd's body relaxed but not asleep. At 8 years old, he had learned that storms did not begin when rain arrived. They began when the pressure changed, when birds disappeared from open ground, when scents thickened near the soil. His amber eyes followed Everett whenever the man shifted weight. You staring because I'm handsome, Everett said. Or because I'm limping? Vesper blinked once. Noah looked up from the table. He says neither. Traitor. Noah returned to the batteries. Their relationship had improved since the argument over the conservation trust, but not because either had apologized elegantly. Everett had never been good at elegant apologies. Noah had never been good at accepting them without suspicion. Instead, Everett had begun asking questions before making decisions. Small ones. Do you want to stay at Northglass tonight? Do you want to come to Naomi's lab? Do you want me to sit in while you talk to the reporter? It felt unnatural. That was how Everett knew it probably mattered. His phone vibrated. Naomi Vale, he answered. Morning. You looking west? Yes. Then you know. Naomi sounded tired but focused. The 52-year-old hydrologist rarely wasted words when data was changing quickly. Everett stepped off the porch. What did the newest well reading show? Nothing catastrophic. But the water table is still rising. If we get the rainfall they're predicting, the hydraulic gradient increases. How much time? Don't turn this into a countdown. I asked a question, and I'm answering it correctly. Everett nearly smiled. Naomi continued. This is not a movie where the lake turns toxic at midnight. But if the plume crosses the fractured zone Pike modeled, it could move into the lower drainage system faster than we'd like. We need the disposal source before that happens. You still think his last route points to it? I think it's our best lead. What do the agencies say? They need a confirmed location before they can justify invasive containment work on private or legacy industrial ground. Everett looked toward the forest. So we find it. A pause. We, Naomi repeated. He heard the emphasis. Everett leaned against the porch rail. I know. Do you? Working on it. That may be the most alarming thing you've said all week. He ended the call and found Noah watching him through the cottage window. The boy raised one eyebrow. Everett knew that look. What? You said we. I know pronouns. Historic day. Everett went inside. By noon, Darren Vale's interview was already circulating through local radio and regional news pages. Ardent North Materials had not accused Everett of lying. That would have been crude. Instead, Darren did something much more effective. He questioned motive. The CEO appeared in a recorded interview seated at a simple table in front of a neutral blue background, dressed in his usual dark navy wool overcoat over a light blue dress shirt and charcoal trousers. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, his long face calm, his blue eyes controlled. He spoke about due process, verification, the danger of letting an heir with newly acquired control over highly valuable conservation-linked property influence public perception before agencies completed technical review. He never called Everett greedy. He merely placed the possibility on the table and allowed listeners to pick it up themselves. Noah paused the video. He makes you sound like you woke up rich and decided to save the forest for fun. Everett leaned over the counter. That's because he's good at his job. You're not mad? I'm always mad. You don't look mad. That's because I'm good at mine. Noah stared at him. What exactly is your job right now? Everett looked around the half-repaired cottage, apparently unpaid motel ownership. Noah laughed despite himself. The humor lasted only a moment. His phone buzzed with a local comment thread. He read several lines and stopped. Everett recognized the shift in his expression. What? Nothing. Try again. Noah turned the screen around. One commenter had written, Rourke doesn't live here. He doesn't know what it's like watching your kids leave because there's no work. Another, easy to protect land when you inherited it. Another, ask him how much his trust is worth. Everett read them. There was anger, some ignorance, some fairness. That was the problem. Ignore it, he said. Noah looked at him. That's your advice? Yes. You ignored Grandpa for 19 years. Everett inhaled. Noah immediately looked guilty. Sorry, no. Everett set the phone down. You're not wrong. The admission surprised them both. Outside, wind moved through the birches. Vesper rose. The German shepherd stretched slowly, favoring his right hind leg for 1 second before settling his weight. Everett watched. Noah noticed that too. You're thinking of leaving him. For the field route. He can still work. I know. Then why? Because knowing he can work and knowing he should are different questions. Noah looked toward Vesper. The dog had moved to the door. Ready. Maybe let him answer part of that. Everett shook his head. He's a dog. He's also the only one here who has a better service record than you. Everett gave him a look. Noah stood. Still true. They met Naomi and Silas at the edge of an old county forestry road shortly after 1. Silas Greer had arrived in an ancient green pickup that sounded offended by every gear change. The 79-year-old former K9 trainer stepped out in his weathered brown canvas chore coat, forest green wool shirt, dark work trousers, old brown lace-up boots, and faded canvas cap. He looked at the sky. Bad day for walking. Naomi, in her slate blue waterproof field jacket and dark khaki field pants, closed the rear hatch of her utility vehicle. Good day for groundwater. Silas stared at her. That a hydrologist joke? Yes, terrible. I've heard your dog jokes. Those are cultural heritage. Noah smiled. Everett adjusted Vesper's harness. The German shepherd stood calmly, black saddle dark against tan flanks, ears high, amber gaze moving between the 4 humans. Silas watched Everett's hands. You're worried about the leg. Yes. Good. Everett looked at him. Good. People get stupid when they stop noticing limitations. He crouched, examined Vesper's hind movement as the dog took several steps, then stood. He's stiff, not failing. That your medical opinion? No, that's my old man looking at a dog opinion. Useful, usually. Naomi unfolded a waterproof map on the hood of her vehicle. Pike's final marked route ran northeast from the old lookout tower through mixed forest, then crossed a shallow ridge toward a long-abandoned extraction zone. She pointed at 3 symbols. These are the unresolved markers. If they line up with the field geometry the way the earlier ones did, they should narrow the source area. Silas tapped one symbol. Directional transition. Naomi tapped the same one. Also corresponds to a slope break. Everett looked at both. You're saying Pike designed one mark to mean 2 things. He reused an existing field language, Naomi said. Efficient. Silas grunted. Annoying man. You liked him? No. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Silas added, respected him. Everett understood the distinction. They started walking. The first mile was easy. Old forestry road. Wet leaves. Low brush. Vesper moved ahead on a long lead nose alternating between air and ground. He was not tracking a human scent. He was searching for old materials and pattern changes associated with Pike's route. Weathered wood, metal, treated marker blocks, places where field equipment had once been repeatedly handled. Silas identified faded tree scars where directional tabs had been removed. Naomi checked elevation and drainage. Noah carried a small GPS unit and recorded points. Everett watched everyone. That was what he did when he was uneasy. He monitored, counted, controlled. At the 2nd mile, the trail narrowed. Rain began as isolated drops. Vesper slowed. Everett shortened the lead. The dog's right hind leg was not dragging, but his stride had become slightly shorter. That's enough, Everett said. Noah looked over. What? He goes back. With who? I'll take him. Naomi stopped. You're the one who reads his alerts best. Silas can. Silas shook his head. I can read working behavior. I don't read your dog better than you. Everett frowned. Noah stepped closer to Vesper. We don't need him fast. That's not the issue. Then what is? Everett looked at the dog. The answer was too personal. He did not want the day Vesper stopped being able to work to arrive because Everett had asked too much. He had already done that to himself. Noah lowered his voice. Uncle Everett. Everett looked at him. We don't need him to be what he was. The words landed harder than Noah intended. Vesper stood between them, breathing calmly. Noah continued. We need him to do what he can still do. Everett looked at the path ahead, then down at the dog. All right. He loosened the lead. Slow. Vesper moved, not reluctantly, not eagerly, just forward. 20 minutes later, the route bent through a dense stand of young pines where the obvious trail disappeared. Naomi checked the GPS. Silas studied the trees. Noah looked downhill. Everyone had an opinion. Vesper stopped. Not an alert. He simply refused to continue along the easiest line. Everett almost corrected him, then remembered Noah's words, slow. They waited. Vesper turned toward a narrow gap between two pines and took 3 careful steps. Everett followed. At eye level, half hidden beneath a curl of bark, was a metal marker no larger than 2 fingers. They would have walked directly past it. Naomi cleaned the surface gently. A faded directional notch remained. Silas looked at Everett. Would miss that at speed. Everett said nothing. He looked at Vesper. The German shepherd stood with his weight balanced, silver around his muzzle damp from the rain. His limitation had forced them to move slowly enough to see what their confidence would have missed. For years, Everett had believed usefulness meant maintaining the old standard. Fast, strong, uncompromising. Vesper had just offered him another possibility. Maybe being diminished was not the same thing as being done. Everett rested one hand briefly against the dog's shoulder. Good. Vesper's tail moved once. Then they continued. Rain increased gradually. The forest floor darkened. Water began collecting in old tire ruts and shallow depressions. The next marker led them toward broken terrain where mining had once cut into the ridge. Naomi stopped them at the edge. Old extraction trenches. The ground looked deceptively natural. Young birches had grown through spoil piles. Ferns covered collapsed channels. Rain softened every boundary. Silas pointed downslope. Pike would have avoided the center. Noah checked the GPS. There's another mark about 80 yards east. Everett looked around. Stay close. Noah nodded. They moved carefully. Vesper remained beside Everett now. The dog's pace had slowed, but his focus had sharpened. Noah saw the next marker first, a small weathered square fixed to a tree on the opposite side of a shallow slope. There, Everett turned. Wait. Noah had already taken 2 steps. I can get it. Wait, I'm not 12. Noah. That tone stopped most people. This time it did not stop him fast enough. Noah moved diagonally down the slope. The surface looked firm. It wasn't. A section of wet soil gave way beneath his right foot. He dropped suddenly. Not far. Maybe 6 feet. But the slope carried him sideways into an old drainage trench hidden beneath brush. Branches snapped. Mud sprayed. Noah. Everett was moving before the name finished leaving his mouth. Vesper barked once. Naomi shouted, "Stop! Ground's unstable." Everett ignored her. He reached the trench and saw Noah below, half sitting in muddy water, one leg pinned between 2 fallen timber braces left from old extraction work. "I'm okay," Noah said immediately. Everett climbed down. "Don't move. I said I'm okay. That's not useful." Noah's face tightened. Rain ran off his brown hair and down his pale cheeks. His left leg was free. The right was trapped below the knee. Everett tested the timber. Heavy. Water was already running through the trench. Not dangerous yet, but rising. Claire's face appeared in Everett's mind without warning. Not the photograph, the hospital call, the highway. The empty certainty afterward that someone had been there and then suddenly was not. His chest tightened. He crouched under the timber. "I'll lift. You pull." Naomi reached the edge above. "Everett, wait. We need a strap." "I've got it." "You don't." He set his shoulder, pushed. The timber moved half an inch. Pain exploded through his left knee. He almost lost balance. Noah saw it. "Stop. I'm fine." "Stop." Everett reset his stance. Vesper stood above the trench, whining low in his throat. Silas appeared beside Naomi. "Rourke." Everett ignored him. He pushed again. The knee buckled. He caught himself against the wall. Noah's expression changed from fear to anger. "Stop trying to do everything yourself." The words cracked through the trench louder than the rain. Everett froze. Noah's voice broke. "You're going to wreck your leg, and then what?" "I'm still stuck." Everett stared at him. Noah was breathing hard. "You always do this." "Do what?" "Act like needing someone makes you weaker." Everett's first instinct was denial. Then he looked at the timber, at his knee, at Naomi above, at Silas holding a coil of webbing, at Vesper. Noah was right, again. Everett hated how often that had started happening. He exhaled. "Naomi." She leaned down. "Yeah, get the strap." No judgment, no victory in her face. Just movement, that helped. Silas anchored webbing around a stable tree above. Naomi fed the line down. Everett looped it around the timber while Noah kept his legs still. A forestry rescue crew was already on the way after Naomi's emergency call. Everett wanted to protest that. He didn't. That mattered too. Together, using leverage instead of force, they raised the timber enough for Noah to pull free. Everett caught him before he slipped. For 1 second he held the boy too tightly. Noah noticed, said nothing. Everett looked at his leg. Can you move your toes? Yes. Pain? Some sharp? No. Good. Noah looked at him. Your knee? Later. That means bad. That means later. The rescue crew arrived 12 minutes afterward, 2 county search and rescue volunteers carrying a collapsible litter and medical kit. The senior member, Grace Holloway, was 44, short and powerfully built, with copper-brown skin, close-cropped black hair, dark eyes, and a calm expression that suggested panic had bored her years ago. She wore an orange waterproof shell over a gray rescue uniform and moved with the clipped efficiency of someone who had spent years helping people whose confidence exceeded terrain. Her partner, Eli Mercer, 32, was tall and rangy with fair skin, a reddish beard, and light brown hair hidden beneath a knit cap. He spoke little, checked equipment twice, and treated Noah like a patient rather than a child. Grace examined Noah's leg. No fracture signs. Possible strain. We'll walk him out with support if he can bear weight. Everett started to answer. Grace looked at Noah instead. Can you? Noah nodded. Everett noticed another person asking Noah directly. He filed that away. While Grace and Eli wrapped Noah's leg and prepared a support pole, Vesper moved away from the trench. Not far, 20 yards, then stopped. His head lowered. He inhaled, moved 3 steps, stopped again. Everett watched. The alert was different from the marker work, more scent-focused. Vesper's ears angled forward, his mouth closed. He circled a patch of ground where sparse grass had replaced the surrounding moss. Everett walked toward him. Vesper. The dog looked at him, then returned to the same patch. Naomi joined them. What? He's got something. Marker. No. Everett crouched. The smell was faint, metallic, chemical, something sour beneath wet soil. Naomi's expression tightened. She pulled a handheld meter from her field bag. Silas stepped back. Everybody upwind. Naomi scanned the surface. The first reading was not dramatic. Then she moved 6 feet downslope. The number climbed. Again, higher. Noah, seated near Grace, called out. What is it? Naomi did not answer immediately. She scraped aside a thin layer of wet leaf litter with a disposable tool. The soil beneath was darker, oddly mottled. A rusted strip of metal protruded near a root. Everett's stomach tightened. Naomi backed away. This is enough. Enough for what? To stop touching it. She marked the perimeter with flagging tape. Vesper remained alert but obeyed Everett's recall immediately. Everett clipped the lead shorter. Naomi photographed the area and called her agency contact. Within an hour, a small environmental response team reached the site and used field instruments to confirm elevated volatile signatures compared with background. No one declared victory. No one declared catastrophe. But the team found more. Fragments of old industrial lining, corroded metal, a collapsed access trench. Evidence that this part of the ridge had once been used for storage or disposal. Pike had been right. Not about everything yet, but about enough. The source was here, or close enough that containment planning could begin. Everett stood beside Vesper. The German shepherd's right hind leg trembled slightly from fatigue. Everett removed the harness. Done. Vesper looked up. Yeah, done. The dog leaned against his thigh. No argument. That too was wisdom Everett had not yet mastered. Knowing when to stop, they returned to Northglass after dark. Noah had been cleared to walk with a mild strain and strict instructions to rest. He sat on the manager's cottage porch wrapped in a blanket, one leg extended. Vesper lay beside him without the harness, black and tan body stretched across the boards. Rain tapped softly on the metal gutter Everett had repaired days earlier. Inside, the small battery-powered light Noah had fixed cast a warm yellow glow through the window. Everett came out carrying 2 mugs. Hot chocolate for Noah, coffee for himself. He sat. For a while, neither spoke. The day had exhausted all useful language. Finally, Noah looked toward the lake. Was Grandpa a bad person? Everett stared into his coffee. There were easier answers. He no longer trusted them. He did bad things. That's not the same answer. No. Noah waited. Everett thought about Gideon's signature. The land, Pike, the trust, Claire, the money. 22 years of trying to hold back something he had helped create. He made choices that hurt people, Everett said, and later he spent a long time trying to repair some of them. Noah picked at the blanket. So does that make it enough? Everett looked at him. Enough. The word carried the whole Rourke family inside it. Enough money, enough punishment, enough regret, enough years, enough silence. No, Everett said. Noah seemed surprised. Everett continued. I don't think doing better erases what you did before. Then what's the point? The point is what you do after you know. Noah frowned. Everett looked toward Vesper. The old German shepherd had closed his eyes but remained pressed against Noah's boot. You can't go backward and become the person who never made the mistake. Everett's voice lowered. You can only decide what kind of person gets up afterward. Noah was quiet. Then he asked, Is that about Grandpa? Everett almost said yes. Instead, he looked at his own left knees, swollen beneath dark green cargo fabric, at Noah's wrapped leg, at Vesper's scarred shoulder, at the cottage they had nearly refused to call shelter because calling it shelter might have meant admitting they needed one. Not only him. Noah understood. He leaned back. After a while, his hand dropped to Vesper's neck. The dog opened one amber eye. Noah scratched beneath his ear. No more hero stuff tomorrow. Everett looked at him. You talking to me or him? Yes. Everett let out a quiet laugh. The storm moved east during the night. Beyond the porch, Lake Arden remained dark but calm. Somewhere north of them, environmental crews were setting markers around the source area Pike had spent years trying to document. For the first time, Everett no longer felt that uncovering Gideon's past was something he had to finish alone. Naomi had data he did not. Silas had history he did not. Noah saw weaknesses in him he did not. Vesper could still find things his human senses missed. None of that made Everett less capable. It made the work possible. He had spent most of his life believing strength meant being the man left standing when everyone else needed him. That night, sitting beside his nephew and an aging K9 under a patched roof, Everett understood something simpler. Sometimes strength was staying in the circle long enough to let someone else take part of the weight. And for the first time in years, he did not fight the idea. The first official report arrived on a morning so clear that Lake Arden looked almost innocent. Everett stood at the long table inside the manager's cottage while pale sunlight moved across the floorboards. The storm had passed 2 days earlier, leaving the northern forest washed clean. White birch trunks shone against dark pines. Water still clung to the bare branches, and beyond the motel the lake reflected a sky so bright it seemed impossible that anything harmful could be moving beneath the ground. Naomi Vale set a thick folder on the table. It's confirmed. Noah stopped working on the old electrical panel beside the kitchen wall. Everett did not ask what she meant. He already knew. Naomi removed her slate blue waterproof field jacket and placed it over the back of a chair. At 52, she still carried the compact, durable posture of someone who spent more time walking field sites than sitting in offices. Her gray-green eyes looked tired, but there was no excitement in them. Scientists did not celebrate contamination simply because their hypothesis had been correct. The disposal zone is real, she said. Multiple drums, degraded containment, contaminated soil. The plume matches enough of Pike's model that the state and federal teams are treating his records as materially reliable. Noah swallowed. And the lake? Still no evidence of dangerous concentrations in Lake Arden itself. Everett exhaled slowly. Naomi held up one hand. That does not mean the problem is solved. I know. They've installed additional monitoring wells and temporary controls upstream of the fractured section. Full remediation will take years. Who pays? That's complicated. Everett gave her a look. Everything with Gideon seems to be. Naomi almost smiled. Legacy operators, successor companies, insurers, state funds, probably litigation. What about Arden North? They did not create the disposal site. Their predecessor entities did. But investigators found enough evidence that modern environmental warnings existed during Arden North's due diligence process, and were not fully disclosed in public planning materials. Noah turned from the electrical panel. Darren knew. Naomi chose her words carefully. Investigators are looking at whether senior management delayed or minimized certain modern groundwater concerns. That was as far as she would go. Everett respected it. What happens to the project? Suspended pending review. Noah looked toward the window. That means people lose jobs. Potential jobs, Naomi corrected. Still, yes, there was no victory in the room, only consequence. The official findings also made Gideon impossible to simplify. His signature appeared in the early industrial development records. His investment returns were real. He had profited from decisions that later contributed to risk. The same investigation documented that, years afterward, Gideon had financed monitoring work, bought strategic land along the groundwater corridor, restricted development, and created the conservation structure that now surrounded Lake Arden. He had caused part of the problem. He had also spent decades trying to reduce its reach. The state report did not call him redeemed. Everett was grateful for that. Reports were better when they did not pretend to know what forgiveness meant. White Pine Crossing reacted exactly the way a real town would, poorly and honestly. Someone left a handwritten note on the Northglass office door. Thank you for saving our water. The next morning another appeared beneath it. Thanks for killing our jobs. Everett removed neither. Mara Bell saw them when she arrived carrying coffee and a box of cinnamon rolls. She stood in her rust-red quilted vest, cream thermal shirt, dark brown work pants, and weathered tan ankle boots, reading both pieces of paper. "Seems about right," she said. Everett leaned against the office doorway. "You always this optimistic?" "I own a cafe in a town where half the population thinks coffee should cost what it did in 1987. She handed him a cup. Noah appeared behind Everett. "Caleb okay?" Mara's expression softened. Her nephew had been hoping for one of Ardent North's apprenticeship positions. "He's disappointed." Noah looked guilty. Mara noticed. "Don't?" "What?" "Don't start carrying everybody's life because your uncle taught you bad habits." Everett looked offended. "I'm standing right here. That's why I said it loud." Noah smiled. Mara turned serious. "Caleb found temporary work with a road crew. Not what he wanted, but it's work." Everett looked at the 2 notes on the door. "You think the town will get over this?" "No." Mara's answer came without hesitation. He looked at her. She shrugged. "People don't get over everything. Sometimes they build around it." Her amber brown eyes moved toward Lake Arden. "You saved a piece of land from becoming something dangerous. We found evidence." "Fine, you found evidence." She pointed toward town. "But saving a place and saving the people who live in it aren't always the same thing." Everett stayed quiet. Mara continued. "If Northglass becomes a trust that protects trees and water, but everybody under 30 still has to leave White Pine Crossing to make a living, people will eventually hate the land you saved." That sentence followed Everett for the rest of the day. He had spent most of his life believing protection was about holding a line. Mara was suggesting the line meant nothing if everyone behind it disappeared. The 30th day arrived under light snow, not a storm. Just slow flakes drifting across Marquette. Everett sat once again inside Rebecca Sloane's office with Noah beside him and Vesper stretched near the radiator. The old German shepherd wore no harness indoors. His black and tan coat had thickened for winter, and the silver around his muzzle seemed more visible against the dark room. His right hind leg had been stiffer since the field search, though the veterinarian had found no new injury. Rebecca placed 2 documents on the table. She wore the same dark gray wool blazer, cream blouse, black trousers, and reading glasses on a cord. "This is the decision point." Everett looked at the documents. One allowed him to decline successor stewardship. The other transferred Northglass Motor Lodge into the conservation structure and named Everett interim steward until an independent board could be established. Rebecca tapped the second. Once completed, Northglass becomes the connecting parcel. Approximately 38,000 acres of protected land, easements, water rights, and development restrictions will function as one conservation network. "And I own it?" "No." "Good." Rebecca smiled faintly. "You will have fiduciary responsibilities during the transition." "That sounds worse. It often is." Noah leaned back in his chair. Rebecca continued. "The potential development value remains well above $200 million. That is not personal wealth. You cannot liquidate the trust for private benefit." Everett nodded. He already understood that, but something else had changed. A month earlier, he would have signed or refused without asking anyone. Now he looked at Noah. "What do you think?" The boy blinked. Rebecca looked down at her papers, giving them privacy. Noah studied Everett. "You're asking me?" "Yes. You already know what you want. That wasn't the question." Noah looked toward Vesper. The dog was asleep. For a long moment, Noah said nothing. Then he rubbed both hands over the knees of his black work pants. "I still want a house." Everett almost smiled. "Reasonable. I want a door that locks without a screwdriver. Luxury. I want Wi-Fi that doesn't depend on where you park." "Now you're getting greedy." Noah's mouth twitched. Then he became serious. "But I don't want some family 10 years from now finding out their water was poisoned because we needed money now." Everett held his gaze. Noah added, "And I don't think Mom would want that either." Claire entered the room without being there. Everett felt it, not as pain exactly, more like a hand against an old scar. He looked at the signature line, then signed. Not because Gideon had designed the choice, not because Everett wanted to prove he was better than his father, because he understood what the decision would cost and what it would protect. That distinction mattered. Rebecca signed as witness. "It's done." Everett expected something dramatic. Nothing happened. No light changed. No weight lifted from the room. Vesper opened one eye. Noah asked, "That's it?" Rebecca stacked the documents. "That is generally what $200 million of land looks like when nobody is allowed to spend it." A separate trust surfaced the following week. Rebecca called Everett before sending the documents. "This one is different. Gideon had created it years earlier in Claire's name. After Claire's death, the beneficiary structure transferred to Noah under a verified guardianship arrangement. with Everett authorized to manage certain expenses until Noah reached adulthood. The amount was substantial, not obscene. Enough for a modest house, Noah's education, medical treatment, veterinary care, basic renovation at Northglass, a future that did not begin every morning by checking a fuel gauge. Everett read the amount twice, then asked Rebecca, "Why didn't this activate earlier?" "Because Claire never claimed it. She knew, I don't know." That answer again. Everett almost laughed. The trust did not turn them rich. It did something Everett found more difficult to accept. It made survival less urgent. For the first time in years, there was space between one problem and the next. And in that space, Everett began to notice how tired he actually was. They started repairing Northglass in early spring, not restoring it to what it had been, building something new from what remained. The eastern guest wing needed major structural work, so it stayed closed. The manager's cottage received a new roof. The office windows were replaced. Noah helped rewire 2 rooms under supervision from a licensed electrician and became deeply offended when Everett refused to let him work inside the breaker panel alone. "You trust me with hidden environmental evidence but not a 100-amp service?" "Yes, that makes no sense." "It makes excellent sense." Vesper spent most mornings lying in a patch of sunlight near the porch. His working harness hung more often than it was worn. That was intentional. Retirement had finally begun to mean retirement. One afternoon, Mara arrived while Noah was measuring an old foundation line behind the manager's cottage. She looked at the disturbed ground. "What are you doing?" "Looking for service cabin B." Mara's face changed. "You're still on that?" Noah looked up. "There's still a number 17 with no room." Everett came around the corner carrying lumber. "We found what the key opened." Noah pointed at him. "That does not answer why the cabin was called 17. Mara stared at the ground. "I remember the cabin." Both turned toward her. "You do?" Noah asked. "It was already gone before Northglass closed." "Where?" Mara stepped off the path. Behind the manager's cottage, grass covered a broad rectangular area where the soil sat slightly lower. "Somewhere here." Everett set down the lumber. "Why was it removed?" "Storm damage, I think. Gideon never rebuilt it." Noah looked triumphant. "Room 17. Mara shook her head. "It was service cabin B on the records. Same thing." "No, one is bureaucratic and one sounds like somebody dies there." Everett almost smiled. They searched for an hour. Nothing. No box, no foundation marker, no dramatic discovery. Eventually, Everett told Noah to stop before he dug up the entire yard. The mystery remained. For once, Everett could tolerate that. Not every silence needed to become a mission. At 4:20 that afternoon, Vesper stood. The old German shepherd had been sleeping in the sun. He stretched carefully, paused to loosen his right hind leg, then walked down toward the lake. Everett watched him go. Noah noticed too. Neither spoke. They had seen the habit before, but something was different now. Spring sunlight struck Lake Arden from a lower southern angle and reflected back toward the property rather than across it. Everett followed the line of light. A narrow strip of grass behind the manager's cottage appeared brighter than everything around it. Not glowing, nothing supernatural, just wet ground reflecting sunlight differently. Everett walked over. The grass followed a straight edge, then turned 90 degrees. Foundation. Noah crouched beside him. That's it. They cleared away dead grass and found old concrete beneath. Service cabin B or room 17, whatever Gideon had called it. Vesper returned slowly and sat beside them. Noah rubbed his neck. "You knew?" Everett shook his head. "No." Noah looked up. "He literally led us. He walked to the lake because that's what he does." Everett looked at the reflected light. "We finally looked from the right angle." Noah considered that. Less magical, more useful. They followed the old foundation perimeter. Near one corner, a flat stone sat slightly higher than the rest. A small paw symbol had been carved into its edge. Everett's chest tightened. Together they lifted it. Beneath was a shallow recess. Inside sat a tin box wrapped in waxed canvas. No lock, no trap, no fortune. Everett opened it. Photographs, an old collar tag, Argos, and one sealed letter. Everett, his father's handwriting. For several seconds, Everett simply held it. Noah stood beside him. "You want me to go?" Everett looked at him. Once he would have said yes. Instead, they sat on the old foundation. Vesper lowered himself between them. Everett opened the letter. Gideon did not explain the trust. He did not explain Pike. He did not explain North Ridge. The dead man finally understood that facts could survive without him. The letter was about the things documents could not prove. Everett read silently at first, then aloud. "Son, if you found this, then you stayed longer than I deserve to ask." Everett stopped. Noah waited. He continued. Gideon wrote that for most of his life, he believed money was the most practical form of apology. If a mistake damaged land, buy more land. If a decision hurt people, fun to program. If a family broke apart, create trusts. It took him too long to understand that money could pay for repair without undoing the damage. He wrote that he had been wrong with Everett, wrong with Claire, wrong in business. He did not ask Everett to call him a good man. He did not ask for forgiveness. He asked only that Everett not inherit the worst thing Gideon had given his children. Silence. Everett's voice weakened. Noah looked away, giving him privacy without leaving. Then came room 17. Gideon described a summer when Everett was 7. Service cabin B stood behind the manager's cottage. A storm rolled across Lake Arden at night. Thunder shook the windows. Young Everett became terrified. Gideon wrote, "You wanted me to stay. I did not know how." Everett closed his eyes. The memory arrived, not as a fragment now, a whole room, rain against glass, a narrow bed. Lightning turning the walls white. 7-year-old Everett trying not to cry because Gideon disliked crying. The door opening. Argos entering. The German shepherd jumping onto the bed. Warm fur, heavy breathing. A large body pressed along the child's legs. Everett remembered burying both hands in the dog's coat. Remembered the storm becoming less important. The next morning Gideon asked why he had stopped being afraid. Everett had answered, "Argos state." Gideon wrote that afterward he began jokingly calling Service Cabin B Room 17. There were 16 rooms for paying guests. The dog, he said, deserved one of his own. Everett laughed. The sound broke halfway through. Noah wiped his eyes quickly. Neither commented. Near the end, Gideon wrote about discovering years later that Everett had been paired with a military K9 descended distantly from the same working line that began around Argos and Northglass. He did not call it fate. He wrote, "Maybe some roads circle back without asking us. I hope yours did." Everett finished the letter. For a long while, only the lake moved. Finally, Everett looked at Noah. "I'm sorry." Noah frowned. "For what?" "For thinking taking care of you meant never letting you see me need anybody." Noah stared at him. Everett did not dress it up. "I was wrong." Noah looked down at Vesper. The German shepherd had somehow wedged himself between them so thoroughly that one of Everett's boots was trapped under his front leg. Noah scratched behind his ear. "Of course you picked now to get in the middle." Vesper sighed. Everett smiled. Noah leaned slightly against his shoulder. "That was all. Enough." 1 year later, Northglass looked alive again. Not polished, alive. 8 renovated rooms served veterans and retired working dog handlers in transition. 4 others were being rebuilt. The old office became a small intake center. A converted section near the west wing housed the Lake Arden field station, where Naomi and visiting students monitored groundwater and surface water. A new wooden sign stood near the entrance. Northglass Veterans and Working Dog Retreat below it. Lake Arden Conservation Field Station Mara served on the Community Advisory Board. She insisted this did not make her respectable. Silas visited twice a month and insulted almost everyone equally, which Noah described as his primary therapeutic service. Local contractors received much of the renovation work. A small forestry training partnership began operating from the property. Not enough to replace Ardent North's promised jobs, but something. Everett had learned that redemption worked the same way for towns as for men. Not instantly, not cleanly. Work after work after work. Vesper was 9 now. He no longer joined long searches. Some mornings his right hind leg needed several slow steps before it loosened. Everett never rushed him. The old German shepherd spent most afternoons on the porch. New arrivals often noticed him before Everett. Some veterans walked directly over. Others did not want contact. Vesper seemed particularly good with those people. He would approach slowly, stop several feet away, sit, wait, no tricks, no insistence, just presence. One cold morning, Everett watched Vesper sit near a veteran who had arrived the night before and had barely spoken. For 20 minutes, neither moved. Everett thought about Argos, about the storm, about a 7-year-old boy who had needed someone to stay. Maybe that was the only legacy the dogs had truly passed forward. Not instinct across generations, not magic, a human lesson repeated by animals who understood it better than humans did. Stay. The following spring, a faded pickup entered Northglass just before sunset. Everett was repairing a porch rail. Noah, now 16, was inside arguing with a solar inverter. Vesper slept near the steps. The pickup stopped. Engine idled. Nobody got out. Everett watched. A man sat behind the wheel, mid-40s perhaps, broad-shouldered but hollowed by fatigue, with a short graying beard and a face that had spent too long pretending not to need anything. In the rear seat was an older German shepherd. Black and tan, silver muzzle. The dog watched the motel. The man watched the exit. Everett knew that posture. He had lived inside it. The calculation, stay, leave, accept help, disappear before anyone sees enough to offer it. Vesper stood, slowly. He stretched his hind leg. then descended the porch steps. Everett followed. The pickup's driver lowered the window only halfway. "Place open?" Everett looked at the dog in the back, then at the man. "Yeah, I don't have much money." Everett rested one hand on the window frame. That wasn't the question. The man looked toward the road. Everett recognized the fear beneath his silence. Not danger, hope. Sometimes hope frightened people more because it could still be lost. Vesper stood beside Everett. The old dog did not bark, did not approach the truck. He simply waited. The man finally looked at Everett. Everett said, "You can stay." The engine turned off. Behind him, Northglass stood beneath the evening light. 22 years abandoned. A place that had once contained mistakes no amount of money could erase. Now it contained something smaller. Beds, warm rooms, clean water, old dogs, people trying again. Everett looked down at Vesper. The German shepherd's amber eyes were fixed on the new arrival. Still watching, still working in the only way that mattered now. The road had circled back. And this time, when someone arrived afraid of being left behind, there was a place waiting to stay with them. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder, bright lights, or answers that make sense immediately. Sometimes God places them quietly in our path through a loyal dog who refuses to leave, a door that opens at the right moment, a stranger who chooses kindness, or a second chance we almost walk away from. Everett's journey reminds us that the past cannot always be erased, but it can still become the soil where something better begins. We may carry regrets, wounds, broken relationships, or years we wish we could change. Yet God can still use what remains. A scar can become wisdom. A loss can become compassion. A place once abandoned can become a shelter. And a life that feels finished may simply be waiting for a new purpose. In everyday life, we may never inherit a mysterious motel or uncover a secret hidden for decades. But all of us will face moments when we must choose between pride and forgiveness, fear and faith, walking away and staying. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not that the storm disappears. It is that God gives us someone or something strong enough to remain beside us while we walk through it. And perhaps that is why loyalty matters so deeply. Vesper never needed to understand every mistake, every document, or every painful memory. He only knew when Everett needed him to stay. There are people in our own lives who may need the same thing from us today. Not perfect advice, not money, not grand promises, but simply our presence. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need a reminder that second chances can arrive when we least expect them. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what you believe was the greatest miracle in Everett and Vesper's journey. If you enjoy stories about Navy SEAL veterans, loyal K9s, faith, redemption, and the quiet ways lives can be changed, please subscribe to the channel and join us for the next story. May God bless you, protect your family, give strength to those carrying burdens in silence, comfort those who are grieving, and guide every person searching for a way home. And may you always remember, sometimes the miracle is not finding the road. Sometimes the miracle is discovering that someone stayed beside you until you were strong enough to walk it.